Hello everyone, I'm back for the last three posts. Um, at time of recording this, it's 2 days after the finale, but I'll probably have to record this over multiple days. So because it's 2 days after the finale, I've had a bit of time to reflect on everything and have a look at what people are talking about. That sounds way more serious than it actually is. Like, I, d- I didn't have much to reflect on, but, you know, in my opinion, it's good to not, okay, this is gonna probably sound hypocritical because I posted right after the finale, but I think it's good to not post right after the finale. Certainly not to post in black and white right after the finale because like literally anything could happen over the next 5 years. So why even bother? All right, so let's get back into it, starting with episode 9, which is where we left off last time. All right, KMS. I spent hours on this post and had almost completed it when I accidentally pressed post instead of save draft on my phone, and then panicked and deleted the post and lost most of my progress. Time to die. Please accept this somewhat abridged version. I actually don't think it ended up being abridged. Hi all, some of my subscribers wanted me to make a voiceover of my posts so far, so if you've missed said posts, here is a video with a voiceover of the first 8 weeks. It's not that exciting, but you may find it easier than reading everything. We had a few very hilarious, specific moments of riggery which I wanted to mention this week. Alright, number 1, the post-survivor announcement. This whole section is very classic. We have lots of depression from Zihao about being the only survivor of his team, and lots of stress from Sugar High and Chain's teams who need to kick people out. We also have a few highlights of dramatic moments, like Leo 1's separation anxiety, Qingwei and Yunso both being key for Sugar High, and Kaiwen and Leo having big decisions to make. Junil moves to Lucky Macho, Hengyu and Kaiwen move to main dish. I liked how Zihao had the self-awareness to know that people didn't want to do main dish and to be frank about it. It's true and it gets him more screen time. Also note that there have been tons of reaction shots from Gomu here. I did find it bizarre that all of the teams did this in one room. It gets rid of all of the drama of them being in different rooms, but I suppose Mnet gets to have their cake and eat it too, because here they get to see all of the trainees playing off each other, and later the teams are separated before they push people out, so they also get the dramatic reveals of who got released. Second, we have Sugar High and Chains. As is typical in episode 9, we initially focus on the teams who need to push people out. We start with Sugar High, where I correctly predicted Hanim becoming the leader. Qingwei ends up getting pushed out to main dish and gets a mini selfless edit of trying not to cry for the sake of his team, and of his friendship with Yunso. This is painted as a massive loss for the team because of Qingwei's dance skills. In Chains, we have lots of Gomu screen time and a decent amount of Lee Jong screen time. Leo and Kungmin struggling with vocals. Kungmin bad vocal edit. Honestly, he was probably sick or something. And Leo 1 pitying Kungmin. Honestly, I'd say this is a pretty bad edit for Kungmin since he failed over and over and wasn't given any justification for it, such as a bad voice condition. His words about finding a better role elsewhere seem harsh and almost arrogant, and the other trainees saying they're scared is a really bad look. If the subtitles are to be believed, which honestly they're not, Leo, one of Mnet's picks and one of the most popular trainees on the show, literally said he was scared Kungmin would hit him. I shouldn't need to tell you why that makes it a bad edit and makes Kungmin borderline unredeemable. I told you they were going to give him a bad edit / didn't want him, but you didn't believe me. Alright, 3, back to main dish. There's a massive contrast between Kungmin not being wanted in Chains and his very positive reception by our sweetheart Zihao. Zihao saying, "How come they gave us this gem?" is a really good look for Kungmin. Junso is also moved to main dish. This is awkward since he was the leader of Chains, but it's a good look for him that he volunteered instead of stewing in it. Speaking of stewing in it, Zihao keeps pointing out how upset Kungmin looks, which I don't think is a good look for Kungmin. Like, yes, take your revenge, but a K-idol can only ever take revenge gracefully. Anyway, this is a lot of screen time for Kungmin and Zihao. 4, we get the teaser for Lucky Macho. By teaser, I mean the teaser of the storylines that happen before the actual performance. Harry's heroic last act as a character on this show was to give Dongyu a depressing backstory. Everyone say, "Thank you, Harry." "I told you Dongyu would get a great leader edit in this episode, but only Dongyu Nation believed me!" So, outside of Lucky Macho predictably being all about Dongyu, it's also about Dongyu and Junmin's friendship. Junmin is an Mnet pick and has been highlighted positively lately, so him saying that he has faith in Dongyu and them getting the cute roommates edit is great for Dongyu. We also get a quick snipe at Junso, as Dongyu mentions that he volunteered for lots of things but never got them. Thus, we see a clip of Junso saying that he was the leader 4 times in a row, making him seem selfish in comparison to the angelic Dongyu. Dongyu also gets lots of cute/funny moments like his disheveled hair indicating hard thinking. Anyway, even though this is just the teaser section, we still get a great edit of Dongyu, who is shown to have a sense of responsibility for his team after Harry's elimination. He is shown helping with literally everything: rap, vocal, dance, emotional support, etc. He uses English as needed when there are language barriers too. This shows his dedication and his humble sense of responsibility and subtly paints him as an all-rounder, since to help people he must know how to do everything himself. Speaking of, it was a super good choice for him to choose to do vocals for this mission, since he's previously done both rap and dance. So not only does this show that he could be the group's main vocalist, hence getting more people to vote for him, it also shows his versatility and confidence as a performer. "I told you he was Gunnock 2.0? Yeah, he's Gunnock 2.0 in all regards except for debuting. Alright, number 5, the teaser for Sugar High. The other teasers aren't nearly as interesting or as in-depth as Dongyu's, since, well, Mnet are pushing Dongyu, as I said they would. Sugar High team need to cheer up on behalf of Qingwei, and the whole point of this team is that Yunso is the only performance leader and is super stressed, doing his absolute best to teach his teammates who are far below his skill level in dancing. There's also a lot of him being stressed about a potential crisis, and the good highlight of him teaching his teammates one-on-one. Next, the Chains teaser. The whole thing here is that Sangwon is depressed and anxious, but volunteers for the killing part against 2 Chinese people. I hope you didn't forget that Sangwon is depressed and anxious. Anyway, Unshin and Jieha won't be evil edited because Mnet likes both of them, but they are still just accessories to Sangwon's story. 7, we have main dish teaser. Zihao is on the border of an evil edit here, suddenly wanting the killing part after promising it to his new teammates earlier, but he seems aware that if he ever shows RBF or something, he needs to instantly say something funny and or happy, which helps him avoid any negative interpretations. Thankfully for him, Mnet is assisting him in this by not editing out him being nice, because they like him. Wonjae, is that you? Kangmin is super passionate about doing well, and Zihao wants to harness his energy. The only issue with this is that Zihao said that Kangmin was so passionate and scary that he, quote, cried a little, which is funny in and of itself, but combined with Leo saying earlier that Kangmin looked like he was going to hit him, this isn't a good look for Kangmin. On the bright side, Zihao is happy for him, which reflects well on him. 8, Mini Riggery. We get a mandatory slow-mo sentimental montage of everyone practicing, but there's a small piece of riggery here that I can practically guarantee you didn't notice. There's a shot of Gongwoo with the voiceover, quote, "I will take my part of 10 seconds, shine the brightest, and show everyone what I've got." Okay, so you'd think that Gongwoo said this, right? But Jiehao was the one who actually said it, and we know that because the subtitles have his rank, 19th, next to them. Jiehao was in this B-roll shot, but only in the very background, making Gongwoo the salient figure, thus associating him with Jiehao's selfless words. This is clearly another subtle attempt by Mnet to make people like Gongwoo more, but it's kind of crazy how they use Jiehao's words to do it. Also, when the fans are coming into the venue, there's a lot of Leo fans, showing how supported Leo is and thus how Mnet support Leo. Alright, here we have Lucky Macho for reals this time. Winners! Junmin got positive screen time, I'll discuss below. Dongyu got positive screen time, I'll discuss below. Shinlong got positive screen time, but less than the 2 above. I'll discuss him more later in this post. Also, hilariously, he said he's scared of motorbikes. I'd also like to mention a piece of mini riggery. He was given a crop top, and Mnet only give crop tops to people they like or want to highlight. Two other notable crop top wearers Mnet likes are Jihao in Tambourine and Chains, and Junghao in Jelly Pop. He also got a mini sob story about getting a low performance score, which would encourage people to vote for him more. I'd also like to make sure you note that he was given the most similar outfit to the killing part Junmin, making him, combined with his large number of lines, look like the second killing part. Losers, there was no one, good on them. Notes, the rest of the team were given almost no screen time, but what they were given was positive, so good on them. Lucky Macho was the Dongyu Junmin friendship arc featuring Shinlong, Mnet's Wolf King. I took a few notes here. I put that in quotes because I feel like it was more than a few. Was Lucky Macho shown first so audiences would have the maximum time possible to vote for Dongyu? Dongyu's intro introduced him as the leader, the maknae, and the lowest rank. So, sob story. Dongyu easily achieving main vocals. Junmin and Dongyu praised by the original choreographers, which is a huge point in their favour. First in the interim check. Junmin referencing Yunso's crisis concerns, which is comedic and ties him to another positively viewed trainee. Junmin and Dongyu chatting, plus Dongyu gets the sob story of being the only one left. Like a superhero, he has dead parents/friends who motivate his story. In this case, the dead parents/friends are Harry and the IST trainees. Junmin and Dongyu being consistently on time is a great look for them. It shows that they have the skill to be K-idols and also the personality, which is something crucial for K-idols. I might mention this later, but I had a few comments of people saying that they were really sick of the Junmin Dongyu being on time edit. They were like, why did it take up so much screen time? Like, what was the point of that? I want to see them being skilled, not them being on time. But it was actually a really good edit for them because we already knew that both of them were skilled. We saw that last mission for both of them. But now Mnet are showing us that both of them have the personality, the humbleness, etc. to be idols. So, you know, Mnet's thing this season really seems to be hexagonal idols, and they introduced that with Shinlong. Idols who have a good personality as well as multiple talents, and that's what they were pushing with Junmin and Dongyu, and I personally think it worked really well. Junmin and Dongyu were dual leaders of Lucky Macho. There were lots of compliments for them and for Shinlong. Dongyu and Junmin embodying the manly but principled message of the song, which was a slay. Dongyu and Junmin highlighted as having fun on stage, which is another good thing for K-idols to do. Here we have a mini Riggory alert. Just before the music starts, someone screams Dongyu really loudly, and Mnet have chosen to make this salient. This makes us subconsciously focus on Dongyu more as the person to look out for. I think in this segment, Mnet are definitely pushing Dongyu as a main vocal for the group, along with Leo and Anshin, and they're trying to remind audiences that a main vocalist doesn't have to be epic and have showy high notes. Instead, it's better that they can very solidly bring their team together vocally and lead vocally. Dongyu doing rap dance vocal on this show is also a great move for him and shows his versatility. Of course, he also still needs Mnet to debut, because no one debuts if they're invisible edited unless their name is Gyuven or Bahie, but it was still a smart choice. Sanghyun is the Gyuven Bahie invisible edit king this season. Anyway. You know who else showed vocal dance rap versatility? Ganek and Youngin! Slay! Also, they ended up cutting the teased storyline of Yumeki changing the choreography and doing a bad job. I don't know why. Mnet are odd. Maybe because they don't want Yumeki? Yeah, that was really weird. Because they don't want him, right? So you'd think that they'd show it to portray him in a bad light. But the reason I said, oh, maybe it's because they don't want Yumeki, is because they might have realised that if they gave him more screen time, and especially more negative screen time, it might have polarised his fandom and made them vote harder for him. So maybe they were like, it's safer to just give him no screen time. 10 Sugar High for reals this time. Winners, Yunso, he got all of the screen time in this mission. He is the only one who wasn't criticised or highlighted making mistakes, and it's made clear, or at least the editing wants to make it clear to you, that his dance skill is far superior to his teammates. He gets to be stressed and have the sob story of being last in the interims, and he has a mental breakdown, which is designed to make the audience feel sorry for this poor, hardworking kid and vote for him out of protectiveness. He also got lots of performance highlights, and all of the other contestants are suitably outraged at his low score. Mini winners are Leo and Shinlong, who got lots of reaction shots. Losers, we have Masato. He was the member who was shown to be making the most mistakes the most often. However, him apologising to Yunso and being the first person to come over and talk to him is a good look for him. He's also last in the interims, which is a bad look. We also have Hanum. Mnet seemed to be actively avoiding giving him screen time. They even weirdly panned to Masato during the performance, even though Hanum was singing. I think I'll have to illustrate this for you. Okay, so here's Sugar High. Where is it? I think it's at the start somewhere. Okay, so it's this shot, right? Not this one, it's coming up. Hanum starts singing, right? And he's still singing here, but the camera pans into the random aegyo that Masato is doing instead. Because this just seems like the most like, oh, we've given up even pretending to be nice to this guy. Let's just pan away from him during the shot in which he is singing. Like, what is this? I mean, they don't like Masato either, but they like him more. Alright, notes. Everyone else is a mini loser. All of them were shown to make mistakes, and these mistakes put a lot of stress on Yunso. They also made mistakes during the actual performance, although those weren't highlighted, because at this stage of the competition, Mnet likes to act like everyone left is ready to debut. That said, them all apologising to Yunso was a good look. 11, we have main dish for reals. I predicted this! Okay, I mean, I predicted Kangmin slash Junso not doing so hot, but I didn't predict Hengyu also not doing so hot, because Mnet like him. Winners? I actually don't think anyone's a winner on this team, but if I had to put someone here, I would put Sihao, who was complimented for his performance and given a decent amount of screen time. It was odd to not see him try and mediate between Hengyu and Kangmin the same way he did with Li Zhong and Zhong Jing, but he did give his team a pep talk at the end, so I suppose that was good. A mini winner is Qingwei. He was cute, he was a good performer, he was holding Hengyu back and comforting him, was teaching Hengyu, and was just generally the most salient member outside of Kangmin, Hengyu, Zihao. Also, of course, I'm biased towards him. We also have a mini winner who's Donggu, who got a lot of screen time. Losers, we have Junso, who got 0 screen time, rip, and Kangmin. Considering this and the teaser section with him leaving chains, he was painted as a very angry person and emotionally unstable. It seemed like he was lashing out and putting blame on other people without taking personal responsibility, and it seemed like he was trying to pick fights. He was subtly contrasted with Qingwei. Qingwei taught Hengyu patiently and calmly, but we only saw Kangmin getting angry with Hengyu, which paints him in a bad light being compared. He gave a great performance and was complimented a lot for it, but I still think he came out with a negative image. It also looked like he was gossiping about Hengyu with Dongyu, who only had good things to say about his own team, which also looks bad. Notes, Hengyu, I'm putting him as a mini winner because yes, some people have had a negative perception of him, especially as being skillless, but I think the edit was actually designed to make him a more sympathetic character, since it showed how much Kangmin turned on him and how much he turned on himself. He was shown to be trying to improve, and his self-directed anger makes him seem more sympathetic, especially since we can see him wondering about his position in the team. He's also tied to Qingwei, who comforts him and holds him back from potentially squaring up to Kangmin. And Qingwei has a positive character on this show, hence that association is good for Hengyu. That said, there were still lots of negative elements here which prevent me from putting him in the winners section, including him squaring up to Kangmin, him struggling with the choreography, and the masters telling him off. I'll talk more about that later. Overall, I think this edit will make people protective of Hengyu. I was right about that. And I also noted that Kaiwen has been infected by Anshin's finger guns. Sounds about right. What I've seen most people say online is that both sides are understandable, but Kangmin really picked the wrong time and place to tell Hengyu off. It almost seemed like Kangmin was purposefully trying to provoke him by picking that moment. And apparently people think that Hengyu is hot when he's angry, which I completely disagree with. 12, we have chains for reals. This is the main dish of this episode. This was one that I actually didn't predict. I knew they'd have a Sungwon Jiahao storyline, but I genuinely thought there would be some epic Leo redemption arc after last mission, and there wasn't, which was odd. Maybe they decided not to put it in because it wouldn't really have been evidenced by live votes, considering he still got a relatively low score. The other possibility is that they didn't put it in because they were confident enough in Leo's position in the final group that they didn't feel the need to edit him more. There was a very vague possibility that if they gave him tons of screen time here, he might have ranked first in the show, which they don't want. They wanted him, like, I don't know, let's say third or fourth. Winners, we have Sangwon, who got lots of screen time, was depressed and anxious. I'll discuss more below. Jiahao had lots of screen time, a good highlight, I'll discuss more below. Losers, none, good on them. Notes, Unshin got a decent amount of screen time, including showing his anxiousness and his friendship with Sangwon. Leo got lots of compliments and was highlighted as skilled, but didn't get tons of screen time. Lee Jung and Gongwoo both got screen time, but not tons of it. Gongwoo got more because he gets loads of reaction shots. It is wacko that Gongwoo was tied up on a bed. Lee Jung was shown to be a good leader and was goofy by shaking the soft drink bottle. Here are my notes on the Sungwon Jiahao storyline. Jiahao got a duality highlight, a dance highlight, a sexiness highlight, and a sob story of getting few lines. Sungwon being the killing part every single time. Jiahao was painted as the master's favourite and as having a great mindset highlight, showing how much Mnet likes him. Mnet never have the masters saying that they like someone, as in, like, personally, right? The masters can say, like, oh, this person gave a good performance. But if the masters say, like, oh, you're my favourite, I would vote for you, that kind of thing, it's always an Mnet pick that they say that to. But them highlighting that he has a great mindset is also the kind of thing that they do for people they want, because, like I said, hexagonal idols, right? They want people who, or at least they want to paint their faves as people who are skilled and also have a good personality. Mini riggery alert. Sungwon saying, quote, there must be a reason the fans put me in this team, and then the masters saying, nicely said, is like massive mini riggery to include here, because it appeals to the fans' power. Appeals to the fans' power are powerful, as in anytime they appeal to the fans' power, that makes people like that's a powerful tool to make the fans like someone more. I hope that makes sense. Sangwon facial expressions highlight. Unshin plus Sangwon and Lee Jong plus Sangwon talking about Sangwon's anxieties for Jiahao and wanting to give Jiahao more parts. This makes all three of them, but especially Sangwon, look selfless and kind to give Jiahao more lines. Jiahao and Sangwon working hard together. Jiahao being thankful for being given more lines. Sangwon looking anxious right before the performance. Lots and lots of compliments for both of them and both getting good scores. Interestingly, Jiahao and to a lesser extent Unshin looked absolutely petrified during most of this story. I wonder if he/they were worried about potentially being evil edited. He seriously looked like he was going to faint or something. Anyway, I think the point of this edit was largely to attempt to ensure that Sangwon is PO1 at all costs. Mnet are probably mega sweating right now, worried that Unshin, Shinlong and or Gongwoo could rank first. Of course, they don't want a Chinese centre, but they also don't want a super controversial centre. Looking back from the finale, they were mega sweating about Unshin and Shinlong. Mega sweating. Alright, 13, the interim results. Mnet gave us 2 interim results for this round. The first one was 2 days before the episode. They revealed ranks 17 through 19 as Yumeki, Kaiwen and Zihao. Second, at the end of the episode, they revealed Junmin at 16th and Sanghyun as 17th. And before I say anything else, can I just say, you all said I was crazy for saying Sanghyun would drop this round. You all said I was insane to say people like Hanum probably have a bigger one pick than him and that he would drop. You all downvoted me because you thought he was safe, and now what? Now you're all shocked that he dropped so much. Well, joke's on you. Casper knows all. On a more serious note, yes, I have made some incorrect predictions, but considering the majority of my predictions have been pretty accurate, you all should stop calling me crazy. Anyway, what was the point of these interims? Well, as people correctly pointed out after the first one, the first interim probably meant that Mnet didn't like the people in ranks 14 through 16 and wanted to replace them with Yumeki, Kaiwen, and Zihao, none of whom they want in the group, mind you, but all of whom they do like, at least a little. Re the second interim, I think it had two purposes. First, by showing Sanghyun they make people mega panic. That's just good drama. They know that he has large enough fan base to rise and push someone in 14th to 15th out. But Junmin's in 16 and they want him in the group, so they also have to show his rank to ensure that he's safe. So the question is, who was in 14 to 16 at the start? Well, we have a rumoured ranking reveal which I think is pretty believable, and which I'll go through in the next segment, but if that's to be believed, it would seem like Masato and Hanem were around 14 to 16, neither of whom Mnet likes, and who they'd be more than happy to get rid of. They'd certainly rather have Junmin slash Yumeki slash Kaiwen slash Zihao. If the rankings are to be believed, this riggery was successful and both Masato and Hanem are out. The only thing I find even vaguely weird about all of this is that they showed Sanghyun. You'd think they'd want to get rid of him since they'd be worried he'd make the final group. But if his rank slipped this much from a 5 pick to a 3 pick, it's likely it will slip even further in the finale, so they're probably not too worried. So I was worried, I was wrong about this. His 1 pick didn't slip in the finale, but I think the only reason it didn't slip is because of this interim. I think that, I mean, obviously, if they hadn't shown this interim, he would have been eliminated, right? But because they showed the interim, his fans started freaking out as well, which I don't know if I mentioned it here or somewhere else. I said it was a bit dumb of them to do that. Like, a bit dumb of them to freak his fans out, because then he'd be more likely to make the final group. And I was right. What a shocker. I reckon the reason they did it is because, so Zihao, Kaiwen, they like, not enough for the group, but they would be happy to have them in the group and probably want them in the top 16. Junmin they want in the group. Yumeki, they know he has a big enough fandom to push Masato and Hanem out, but they know that he has a small enough 1 pick to not debut. And by the way, I predicted that he had a small enough 1 pick to not debut from episode 1. And people were calling me crazy. And look at that, he didn't debut. What a shocker. So Sanghyun's the only one out of those 5 people who they didn't want in and is likely to debut, right? And I'll talk about this more when I get to episode 11, but I believe the reason they did that is because if Sanghyun had been eliminated, it's quite likely that all of his votes would have gone to Liu, and Mnet vastly prefer Sanghyun to Liu. So they didn't want Sanghyun in the group, but they preferred him over many of the other people like Kangmin, etc. I reckon that's one of the reasons why he got shown. Anyway, 14 is the rumoured ranking leak thoughts plus Final Survivor livestream. The rumour is as follows. I think it's pretty believable, and I'll give my thoughts as to why next to each person. 1. Sangwon, duh. 2. Anshin, duh. 3. Leo, duh. 4. Gongwoo, duh. He will continue to rise or at least maintain his rank. I was correct, what a shocker. Jiahao, this seems a bit too high, but it does make sense that he would rise significantly considering his virality in Tambourine and Chains and his general likability. 6. Shinlong, if Gongwoo and Jiahao rise, he has to fall, so this makes sense. 7. Junso, duh. 8. Sanghyun, duh. He would rise significantly after the ranking interim. 9. Yumeki, duh, he would rise significantly after the ranking interim. 10. Liu, he's always been popular. Predictable he would drop this round. I predicted this since other trainees would rise. Okay, so he didn't actually drop, he maintained his rank. But I was right that he wasn't going to be in the top 9, oh, sorry, not top, gosh, the top 8. I was right that he wouldn't be in the top 8, like, as time went on, you know. 11, Kangmin, predictable drop considering his edit and others rising. 12, Kaiwen, predictable considering the ranking interim. 13, Junmin, predictable considering the ranking interim. 14, Dongyu, the bottom ranked trainee automatically gets a boost, so Dongyu going up was guaranteed. Him being high enough to survive also makes sense considering his good edits in both Bad and Lucky Macho. Dongyu Nation rise! I predicted this, but non-Dongyuers called me crazy. Looking at the fact that Sanghyun, Yumeki, Junmin, Kaiwen all rose, it's quite likely that Dongyu was actually 10th or 11th before all of the interims, which is kind of crazy, honestly. And honestly makes me more depressed, so I'll move on from that. 15th is Lee Jong. This is predictable considering he's had a lot of screen time lately and got the benefit. Also, this was literally confirmed by Mnet anyway in the live stream. 16, Woojin. He's always been popular. 17, Hanim. Predictable drop with no screen time and also being shoved out. And 18, Masato. I predicted this drop. Considering his bad edits and no screen time, plus being far outshone by both Junso and Dongyu. This means that unfortunately, Hanem, Masato, Qingwei, Zihao, Yunso, Hengyu, Junil, and Hanwen are eliminated. And this all makes sense. None of them have super powerful fan bases, and most of them have been pretty invisible lately. Let me break it down. Hanem is invisible and was probably the target of Mnet's interims. Apparently he has a decent Korean one-pick fanbase, so Mnet were probably worried he'd debut. Rip, he slayed. Masato was another likely target of the interims. Mnet don't particularly like him, although they are neutral. He had little screen time, most of which has been negative lately, so a drop makes sense. Qingwei is invisible, a drop makes sense. He didn't get the epic Mnet edit I hoped for, so rip my poor child. Zihao, people are predicting Zihao at 19th, which would make sense considering the interim and his general likability. He doesn't actually have a strong voting fanbase, but is a filler pick, hence the predictable fall. Although I deeply hoped for him to survive to the finale, I had a feeling this would happen. So, rip King. Yunso, somewhat surprised about this one, but I suppose his edit wasn't enough to make him rise. If he had made it through, I feel like he could have been the Mnet of the group, since Mnet were heading more and more in that direction. Rip. I don't know what was going on, like which drugs I was on when I wrote this. They were not going for Mnet Yunso, but they 100% like Yunso. They didn't want him in the group, and thank goodness considering the whole alpha thing, but they really like him, so good on him. Hengyu was already falling, so this was predictable. Rip, he got killed by the merge, because I really believe he would have been in the top 8 member C group. Junil is predictable. Honestly, he was pretty lucky to have survived last time. Hanwen, again, was lucky to have survived last time. So, like I said, this is all pretty believable, and honestly, this could have been completely made up and still makes sense. I probably could have guessed something close to this pretty easily. This turned out to be true, by the way. Fun fact. During the Final Survivor livestream for this round, there was no live vote for a final survivor. Instead, Mnet just announced a random clue for the group name, the finale songs which no one seemed to like, and announced Lee Jong at rank 15, with the big bonus that he only survived with the benefit. They notably did not announce candidates for rank 16. Why? Well, pretty obvious. They clearly like the person in rank 16 and don't like the people in ranks 17/18, so they don't want to risk one of the people they don't like getting voted in. If the rumours are to be believed, Woojin was in 16th and Hanem in 17th. This is a very clear choice for Mnet. They don't want Woojin in the final group, but he was part, possibly, of their 16-member lineup, so they like him. As opposed to Hanem, who they clearly don't like because they've been invisible editing him all season. This makes complete sense. Okay, now on to 15 complaints I've seen this week. Yep, I'm sad to say we're back with this segment. Please chill on the complaints, people. Quote, Junmin gets so much screen time, it's so unfair to the other trainees. I've never seen you complain about anyone else's screen time. When are you going to complain about Sungwon's screen time? Shinlong's? Dongyu's? Yunso's? You just don't like Junmin and think he's ugly. That's the only reason you're pretending to care about unfairness. Quote, they don't like cute trainees. Why? It's an alpha concept, guys. Quote, they're pushing so many people who fill the same niche, like Junmin and Shinlong. Why? It's an alpha concept, guys. Quote, Hengyu's editing was so unfair and xenophobic. I can't believe Junmin got hugged by the judges and Hengyu was just told to stop spreading depressed vibes. Why are you surprised? Produce has been xenophobic for 10 years. It's even happened already in this show with the treatment of C trainees. Why are you surprised? This is Mnet's MO and has been for 10 years. Yes, Hengyu's edit was questionable, and it was kind of horrifying to see him being told off for the judges like that when he needed uplifting in comparison to Junmin, but people using this as an excuse to hate on Junmin is crazy. Quote, why didn't Shinlong get any screen time this episode? Mnet hate him, he deserved more. First of all, he got lots of screen time. He got more than most. The only reason it felt like he wasn't there at all is because over the past few episodes, we got used to him getting tons of screen time. So now that he has a normal amount, it feels like very little. The people who have been saying that Mnet does this because they don't want any chance of a Chinese center are correct. And, yeah, so basically it's all relative. Because we were so used to, like, hours worth of Shinlong screen time, him getting less than Dongyu and Junmin makes it seem like he's invisible to his fans, even though he's obviously not. Speaking of them not wanting a Chinese center, at this point, we can guess based on the finale that the data was pointing to Shinlong having a very high chance of being rank 1. So Mnet were definitely sweating about that. Quote, Unshin's getting no screen time, Mnet hate him. Bruv, why would they have made him the center of C Planet if they didn't want him / like him? The simple fact that he's the center is evidence enough that they want him in the final group. And no, they didn't drop him with the merge the same way they probably did with Woojin and Qingwei. I'll talk more about this at the end. Quote, this season is so trash and controversial. Not really. Every season has had controversy and controversial contestants, and everyone thought each season was trash, and now they view it with nostalgia. Remember Girls Planet? Remember Produce X 101? I can practically guarantee that when the group debuts, you'll all be bawling, going, OMG, I remember Boys 2 Planet. Time flies. Can we go back to Boys 2 Planet? That time was so crazy and funny and iconic. 16, the AO3 update. The current top 8 is Sungwon, Leo, Anshin, Liu, Kaiwen, Kangmin, Junso, and Jiehao. Leo has reclaimed his second place spot. Jiehao has overtaken Shinlong. There's still an insanely large gap between Leowon plus Anshin and everyone else, and Sungwon is still at the top by a massive margin, still gaining an insane number of fix every week. Relationships. Leowon have reclaimed first place. Leowon and Sungwon / Anshin are still miles above the rest. Kaiwen / Hanwen are still holding on by virtue of their small but dedicated fan base. Harbin are still going strong. What a shocker. I also have no clue how Seungmin / Jingsheng are here. Like, why are they here and why do they have so many fics? They just started showing up this week, so I guess they received a new fic or something. I don't know why I'm so invested in who's reclaiming which places and whatever. It feels like watching a race or something. Alright, 17, Mnet's top 8 this episode. Sangwon, Jiehao, Yunso, Dongyu, Junmin, Zihao, Hengyu, and Anshin. Fun. This is a 4K 4C or 4K 4G ratio, which is nice and even. Next, 18th, we have Mnet's top 8 cumulative. I'll rank them in order of how strongly I think Mnet wants them, and as with the last few weeks, I'll put my confidence rating next to each. First, Sungwon, 10 out of 10. Second, Shinlong, 10 out of 10. Third, Junmin, 8 out of 10. Fourth, Anshin, 10 out of 10. Fifth, Gongwoo, 10 out of 10. 6, Dongyu, 9 out of 10. 7, Leo, 9 out of 10. 8, Yunso, 7 out of 10. Or Jiehao, 7 out of 10. Here's where it gets interesting. I wasn't entirely sure on the last spot. If you watched my Reading My Boys 2 Planet posts video, you'll know that at the end of the video I predicted that Lee Jung was actually the 8th member, who I also thought would be a Korean person. But Lee Jung, although he got lots of screen time this episode, didn't get the epic edit I thought he might get. Instead, Yunso got a pretty good Mnet type edit, which made me think they maybe want him. However, one, he's probably been eliminated, and two, they didn't actually want anyone from Sugar High team, so he might have just been the best person for a storyline, slash the one they liked the most, hence the edit. Jia Hao, on the other hand, has been getting lots of good screen time, but one, he sat in the first place seat in episode 1, and two, he's Chinese! Ew, says Mnet. So I think the big thing that went wrong here with my analysis was, first of all, Yunso got like a lot of screen time in this season, which kind of threw me off because obviously he doesn't suit the alpha concept. So I thought it was weird that they'd give him so much screen time if they didn't want him in the group. But I reckon he's just, he's a bit like Zihao, right? They like them, partially for comedic purposes, partially because they're a good, strong base for Mnet's favourites to bounce off of. But I think my mini prediction in the middle of all of that, which was that they didn't want anyone from Sugar High, so he might just have been the best person for a storyline, I think that was correct. They really like Yunso, just not enough for the group, and they didn't want anyone in Sugar High, so he was the best person. They are possibly setting him up for being the Maknae of Even 2.0. That's all I can really think of. Otherwise, it might just be that, like, literally everyone in the entire K-pop industry loves Yunso. Like, ever since he was a teeny tiny baby, everyone has loved him, so maybe that's why. Regarding my prediction that it might have been Lee Jong at the end of my previous video, the reason I made that prediction, like I said in this post, is because I was convinced the 8th person needed to be Korean. This was a really dumb move on my behalf because I went into this season biased, which in my opinion is something you should never do. I mean, obviously we're humans, so we need to be biased, but try and minimize it, right? My bias going into this season was that I was convinced that they only wanted Anshin from C Group, and I was able to adjust that very easily to include Shinlong because he was pushed so hard, but I was very convinced that they would only have 2 from the C Group and then they would have international trainees from the K Group. What I didn't account for, because I assumed that Mnet were more biased against C trainees than they actually were, what I didn't account for is the fact that they didn't want any global trainees from the K Group except for Leo. Right? Like, I thought that they'd probably want a Japanese trainee and they didn't. I thought they might want, like, I'd never really thought they wanted Liu, but like Liu would be a candidate for a global K planet trainee, right? But turns out everyone who isn't Korean, whose name isn't Leo, on K planet was doomed from the start, which is a bit awkward. After this post, I felt extremely dumb because Jia Hao had been pushed since the start. I'll talk about this more later because, like, his fans have, like, I'll talk about this in the comments as well. His fans have been absolutely obsessed with telling me that he wasn't pushed until he went viral. Like, no, I'll talk about it more later, but like, holy moly, no, he was pushed from the start. Mnet love him. I was just blind by my preconceived bias to think that Mnet would only want 1, maybe 2 C trainees. Anyway, let me talk about what I said later. Basically, this whole section is me convincing myself that Jia Hao is the 8th member, which I was correct about. I just needed to run it all through in my head. So let's do that. As you can see, I'm overall pretty confident. This has been my solidified lineup for the past few weeks, with the only place that I've been confused about being 8th place / the 8th member slot. as several trainees have been highlighted pretty evenly and the numbers have been muddled by Mnet still favouring many of their possible 16-member group picks. The question now is whether Mnet actually want Jia Hao for the 8-member group, or if he's a remnant of the 16-member one. It would be very weird to have him considering he would be a third Sea Planet trainee, but Mnet also clearly like him, and he was, what's that number? He was 100,000% in their 16-member lineup. On one hand, Mnet would now be aware that fans expect 3 non-K trainees to make it, but there are non-Korean K trainees, which would skew the numbers. That said, almost all of their K-Planet picks are 10,000% Korean, so it evens out the ratio to have Jihao. Anyway, in the unlikely scenario of a Yunso survival, this is a 6K2C lineup or 5K3G, which makes sense. If we go with Jihao, which is currently looking more likely, this group is a very pretty 5K3C or 4K4G. This is a metric I've used to evaluate my predicted groups previously, as Mnet seems to like 4G. Yeah, I'll stick with this. Overall, Mnet like 4G. They wanted 4G for Kepler. They wanted 3G for 0 base 1, so 1 less. They had 2G with Isna, but that's only because they were a 7-member group and the show was mostly Korean. 3 to 4G is usually where they like to sit. So if you've ever made a lineup which is like 8G or 8K, it's just wrong. Let's look at some other metrics. Do we have center material? Yes, Sungwon, Junmin, and maybe Jihao. Do we have vocalists? Yes, Leo, Anshin, and Dongyu. Do we have dancers? Yes, basically everyone. Everyone except for Leo and Anshin, who haven't advertised themselves as dancers, but like obviously they'll be good dancers in the modern era. Mnet, yes, Anshin has been getting more Mnet type screen time lately and has been shown being a typical cute, goofy Mnet. He is oddly old for an Mnet Mnet though. A group all over 18? Stan. Yeah, so the final group ended up being all over 18, which is like massive win. Do we have rappers? Yes, Shinlong, Junmin, Dongyu, maybe Leo / Gomwoo. Do we have a leader? Yes, Junmin, Dongyu, Gomwoo, maybe Shinlong. I forgot to mention Leo, maybe Leo, but you know. Hilariously enough, this also nicely balances us, C trainee-wise. Shinlong for rap, Anshin for vocals, and Jihao for dance, which is possibly a criteria that was used to select them. I was right about that. Not the criteria, I was just right that they're nicely balanced as a trio. And they all nicely suit the alpha concept the group will likely have. Shinlong and Gomwoo even have sold their souls to the alpha concept. Wolf King Shinlong, remember? In fact, you can go further back. You can remember Boy Story Alpha Shinlong. Have I achieved enlightenment? Maybe. I think I had. I achieved enlightenment in episode 9. Alright, one last thing. 19. The overall editing of the groups based on Mnet's lineup. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of people have been complaining about the screen time of each of the songs, but it makes perfect sense if you consider Mnet's lineup. For Lucky Macho, they want Dongyu, Junmin, and Shinlong. Dongyu and Junmin aren't trending so hot in votes, hence they get the big highlight. They want Shinlong but not as PO1, hence he gets screen time but not tons. No, they don't suddenly hate Shinlong. WTF, why would you think that? Sugar High, they don't want anyone in the group, but they do like Yunso and wouldn't mind him in the final group, so he gets the highlight, and since they want the other 5 out, with the exception of Woojin, they get the incompetent edit. Note how Woojin was like the least incompetent. Main dish, they don't want anyone, but they do like Zihao and Hengyu, so they give them lots of screen time. And they don't want Kangmin or Junso, so they give Junso an invisible edit and Kangmin a pretty nasty one, in hopes of them dropping in the finale. Chains, this is where the other 5 members of the group come from. They're pretty confident in Leo, Gomwoo, and Anshin, so they give the highlight to Jihao, who really needs it, and pull him up by tying him very closely to Sungwon, the literal most popular trainee on the show by 10,000 country miles. Easy, right? Yeah, see, my philosophy is kind of like, if you look at it from a logical perspective of what's the best, business decisions for Mnet to make, everything falls into place pretty easily. Alright, 20 conclusions. I am a god at survival show predictions. I mean, I don't want to sound too full of myself, but when you follow Mnet's corporate thoughts, everything just falls into place. Oh my goodness, I'm predicting my own thoughts from multiple weeks ago. Does my brain run on a loop? Am I a robot or something? Am I a an industry plant from Mnet? This is an important philosophical question for you to consider, guys. Is Casper an Mnet industry plant? Now you'll never be able to unthink it. And it's easy to see that anything that goes weird/wrong, like cut storylines and weird pacing, is Mnet trying to adjust over time in a world where they can no longer rig votes. So, I guess that makes me ask, was Produce just better as a show? Like, structurally? Yes, lol. Anyway, there have been rumours there will be a big announcement at some point. Apparently, international fans think a ninth member will be added, and Korean fans think the finale will be a two-pick system. Both are kind of believable. A two-pick would make the top 8 more stable and would keep people Mnet like Unshin and Leo. But it would be unprecedented. Every single season for 10 years has had a one pick in the finale. On the other hand, 9 members makes sense, both in terms of the Planet series and because no one likes an even number group. Even Isna weren't an even number until they were. Rip Ji-yoon. That said, I don't know who the ninth trainee would be. Woojin is unlikely, Qingwei maybe if he survives. Lee Jong is looking most likely right now. It's possible that the ninth person would be to make sure more of Mnet's faves get in case someone like Junso or Kangmin sneak in. Re a producer pick, people have been speculating that it will be either Dongyu or Junmin, and I think this is correct. I think they'd pick Dongyu over Junmin though. I saw someone say it might be Yumeki though. Like, no. Which show have you been watching? Mnet don't want Yumeki in the final group at all. And by the way, Lucky Macho is by far my favourite song from this round, followed by Chains. No, I'm not just saying that because Dongyu and Shinlong are in the group. I genuinely love the song and the lyrics about being manly, not by like hitting women or something, but by sticking to your morals. That's the kind of alpha I want to see from the final lineup. A real alpha male shows emotional sensitivity and respects people while encouraging them to do their best. Lucky Macho feels like the musical embodiment of Kirishima from MHA, and I love it. Slay. Also, what rhymes with slay? A critical thought a day keeps Mnet away, that's what. Okay, looking back at this, I'm literally a god of survival show predictions. I correctly predicted that 9 members wouldn't be likely to happen, specifically because there was no ninth person they pushed as much as the top 8. In previous seasons, I feel like they've pushed a lot of, like, maybe I'm crazy, but I feel like there's been people who have been pretty well pushed, like almost to the same degree as the final group. So, for instance, Yujin in Girls Planet 999, I don't think they wanted her in the final group, but they pushed her quite a bit because they liked her. In Boys Planet, I feel like I haven't watched Boys Planet since it came out, so I can't really think of anyone. In Island 2, they pushed Fuko quite a bit, but they didn't want her in the final group. And in Boys 2 Planet, they pushed Yunso a lot, but again, they didn't want him in the final group. So once you remove Yunso, who they obviously didn't want and was eliminated anyway, out of the top 16, there is the top 8, right? Like the top 8 that Mnet want. And then, like, literally no one else has any meaningful screen time. No one else has any meaningful, like, push or anything that makes me think that Mnet really want them. Kangmin and Junso have had the most screen time, but a lot of it was negative. Junso was more positive than Kangmin, arguably, and I think that's one of the reasons he debuted. But, like, there's no one really there. Lee Jong arguably comes the closest because Mnet have, you know, highlighted him and shown his struggles and made him sympathetic, but, like, they obviously didn't want Lee Jong in the final group, so I was, like, racking my brain, who would be the ninth member? So hence my conclusion that, like I said, they would have a ninth member only if it was like top 7 are their top 7, and then it's like Junso in rank 8 and Dongyu in rank 9, for instance. Then I reckon they would have had 9 members and picked Dongyu too. But obviously that didn't end up happening in the finale. I'll probably talk about that more when I talk about the finale, but like in the finale, they had their top 6, and then they had multiple people they didn't like in a row. So there wouldn't have been, like, if they'd expanded it to ninth, Kangmin would have got in, who's another person they don't like. So obviously they didn't do it because they didn't want extra people they don't want. Anyway, let's talk about comments. I do think this was a good point that, like, as soon as they give any good screen time to other people in Sugar High, they would have gone really high up. Other people agreed with me about the Chinese trainees looking like mega scared. Literally, the number of people who were telling me that I was crazy to think that Mnet liked Dongyu because his screen time was so inconsistent. I mean, not this person, but like people were telling me that it was impossible for him to debut, and it was impossible that Mnet liked him because his screen time was so inconsistent. Neither of those things are impossible. Like I keep saying over and over, Suyeon, Girls Planet, inconsistent screen time would have debuted if Mnet hadn't rigged her out in favor of Xiaoting, and they did want her. They just wanted Xiaoting more. It was entirely possible for Dongyu to have debuted. Mostly I think he got unlucky. I think that he needed an epic high note to debut, and Lucky Macho just did not have an epic high note. And K-pop fans do not see main vocalists as people who are overall strong. To K-pop fans, a main vocalist must be the person who does the epic high notes. And I reckon that's the big reason he didn't make it in. His lack of screen time in the first round has nothing to do with it. Like, literally nothing. He would have been fine. And the fact that he rose so much after getting screen time shows, that it was perfectly possible for him to debut. Yeah, so here this person's talking about Sanghyun being given. He was the most likely candidate, which I agreed with, although I still didn't think he'd actually make it, but he did given himself in, and that were dumb to scare his fans. I don't know. I'll talk about this more at the end, but like Sanghyun's fans are so obsessed with the idea that Mnet want him. Their evidence is only ever he's a Wake One trainee. They must want a Wake One trainee. Like, no. Obviously having Wake One trainees is good for them, but like that doesn't mean they 100% must have a Wake One trainee in the group. Like, do you really think that Mnet care about that? I mean, they do to some extent, but like, they did not want Sangyeon. As I've been saying to people literally a bajillion times, Gongwoo was signed under Wake One, so he would have been a Wake One trainee. So if you're saying like, oh, Mnet want a Wake One trainee, Gongwoo's right there. And the evidence that they want him is so much clearer than the evidence that they want Sanghyun. Sanghyun got almost zero screen time, and the screen time he did get was questioning his choice of picking Queen card. Like, why would you pick a vocal song if you're a rapper and you can't even sing the song? That's not positive screen time. What makes, like, sorry, I know sometimes I'm kind of on drugs when I'm making predictions, but what drugs are you on to think that Mnet wanted Sanghyun? The only reason they could possibly ever want him is because they would rather have him than Liu / Kangmin. That's it. That's it, guys. The other thing is people saying that Jia Hao rising to rank 5 was a fluke and he wasn't going to do well in the finale. Joke's on them, I predicted he'd be likely to debut. I'm glad to hear that people liked me talking about nostalgia and things. Don't worry guys, I'll talk more about nostalgia at the end of this video. Oh, I did find this interesting. is he really like Junmin? Is Junmin really a producer pick? Because wouldn't the editors have considered the fact that he'd be received negatively for being over rigged? No. Mnet don't care. I mean, I literally, I think I said this down here. Like, Mnet do not care how much hate a trainee gets for being rigged, right? I named a few: Dion, Gunnock, Sarang, Shinlong. Mnet do not care if the trainee is getting terrible hate, death threats, etc. As long as people are still voting for the trainee, they don't care about the trainee's mental health via those negative comments. So I feel like to have the thought process basically, or they're pushing him so much that he gets hate, so obviously they don't like him. It doesn't really make sense. If they didn't like him, they just wouldn't give him screen time. This is the other thing that I'll talk about this more at the end. Everyone was telling me that they weren't pushing Jiahao. Yes, they were. I'll talk about it more. It's so wacko. The other thing is people saying that Hengyu wasn't an Mnet favorite. And I mean, you can see my response here. I think he was part of the 16 member group, but he got dropped with the merge. Like, they've obviously shown that they like him. They've made him sympathetic. They've given him lots of screen time compared to background characters, etc. They just don't want him in the final group. Duh. Not this Alf. I was confused about this comment. That's why I didn't respond to it, because I was like, you want a balanced group. The group that I proposed as Mnet's lineup is balanced. If you don't like alpha concepts, that's a completely different issue. That's understandable. But the lineup that Mnet wanted is extremely balanced, and that's how you can put evidence towards it being an actual lineup. This was, I don't know what's going on here. Like, what? I mean, you can see my response. Like, do you really think I hate someone or what? Okay, let's talk about episode 10. Alright, which of you said I was crazy to think Dongyu would survive and have a decent chance? Which of you said it? Fess up! Dongyu Nation rise! Ahem. Another elimination episode, which means more needless drawing out of things, teasers, cliffhangers, drama, etc. It also means we get to see the selection of teams for the finale mission and get all of the drama of those teams. Yay. Just before I start, I'll also say that I've also made a video about the riggery of Boys Planet 1. I don't like plugging myself, but most of the people in this sub are more fans of Boys Planet than Girls Planet, so I thought reminding everyone of what happened in Boys Planet could be useful just before the finale. I've been talking about Zero Base One's ideal lineup in this sub, so I don't know, this could be useful to give some context. I'll happily discuss. I also think one of the reasons I like Lucky Macho so much is because it sounds like an Even song, and I love the majority of Even songs. Also, the announcement was not that the finale would be 2-pick. What a shocker. Okay, 1, the intro. Of course, a mandatory dramatic teaser which includes fights so dramatic they must be staged. What a shocker they were. No K-pop trainee in their right mind would be seen actually fighting with people, certainly not on the floor. Then, screen time for Shinlong as the trainees leave the dorms, and a little mini vlog for various trainees, including Hanem, Gomwoo, Shinlong, Liu, feat. &1, Kangmin, feat. Very Very, Chingwi, Yunso, feat. Sangwon, Sangwon, Duh, and Junso. And of course, this includes Shinlong, like Sangwon, hating to be perceived offstage, which I thought was hilarious. My favourite section personally was Yunso's. I enjoyed seeing teenagers being teenagers, even if it does sadly remind us of how young Yunso is. Hilariously enough, Yumeki going to the Street Woman Fighter performance is even more screen time, showing how overqualified he is, thus further encouraging fans to not vote for him, but instead for people who, like, actually need to grow. I also appreciate the highlight of Sungwon and Junmin reading. It was 10 out of 10. I'd also like to note that Mnet included Harry saying that he supports and is rooting for Dongyu. Riggery! Then mandatory sad times before the elimination to emotionally acclimatise us. Note lots of screen time for Mnet faves, and Jiahao hilariously saying that he's worried because his rank keeps dropping. Foreshadowing! Second, the elimination intro notes and other elimination editing notes. Mnet associating Jihao and Sangwon more. Leo and Anshin being an epic G duo. A highlight of Kungmin being angry, featuring the line from Leo last episode about being worried about being hit, which I genuinely cannot believe would be seen as decent or good under any circumstances. Shinlong's insane airbrushed face special effect is back. It's been massively toned down this elimination, but is still much stronger than for other trainees. People like Hanwen, Kaiwen, and Dongyu look like they barely have any touch-up, and then there's Shinlong, lol. Highlighting how many votes there were, including compared to last season, maybe to allay concerns that this season is flopping. Mandatory stressful teaser of how much the ranks have changed. Including the announcement of the final mission songs is just a way to pad the episode out. Literally, there was no other reason to include it. But I do find it hilarious how the trainees don't seem particularly excited about them. I don't know if they were just too nervous to react or if they actually hated it, but the reactions were very mediocre, especially for Never Been to Heaven. Also, the teaser for the debut group name, which was apparently decoded to be Alpha 1. If you were surprised about this, you shouldn't have been. Anyway, since this is a teaser, I doubt the final name will actually be Alpha 1, but it may well include Alpha and will definitely include 1. That was correct, but it was very obvious. I don't feel like I predicted that. I feel like anyone and their mum could have predicted that. But I do like how the trainees looked mega confused and, in the case of Jiahao, disgusted at the clues. I also liked how they were so disappointed when Baekhyun announced that he'd just be announcing the clues, not the actual name. Mnet being mean, teasing Yunso so many times. But I guess if Mnet have one hobby, it's torturing children, so this is in line for them. The trainee A accent taking over everyone, aka trainee A never die. Mnet came in heavy with the true crime music for this episode, and there was lots of Masato screen time because, again, they like showing people just before they're eliminated. Typical Mnet, show someone tons even when there's nothing the audience can do about it. Third, the episode teaser. Hilariously enough, since the correct ranks had already been leaked, goodness knows how, Mnet kind of gave up when it came to the teaser and didn't even bother blurring the trainees who survived, which means they basically explicitly confirmed the rumours and ranks. I don't know why I didn't update this, but they did delete it later. And I think they re-uploaded it with the trainees blurred, so it doesn't look like they accepted it. It looks like it was a mistake, which is even weirder. The teaser also included a teaser of all of the O3s fighting, which was interesting for me as an O3. Regardless, it basically teased a further Kungmin evil edit, and you might say that Gongwoo is also implicated in this, which I guess he is, but he's always been portrayed positively on the show, while Kungmin has a reputation for starting fights / being provocative at this point, so any casual viewers who don't actually care about Kungmin will be predisposed to side with Gongwoo by default. Fourth, TMIs. I have collated these fun facts for you if you didn't watch the episode. Hengyu has a favourite shirt that he wears everywhere. Jokes on Shinlong, rip. Yunso's favourite Hyung is actually Leo. Anshin kisses Jiahao a lot but never gets kissed back, rip. Zihao and Kaiwen like cuddling. Zihao was completely focused on his food when Zhongxing etc. were fighting in Mission 1, so basically didn't notice them. And the backstory of the trainee A accent, which has been infecting the camp, is apparently it just happened. Okay, thanks, Leo. Fifth, my thoughts on the ranks. I kind of already gave my thoughts on these ranks last week since they were leaked then, and as I said, I found them very believable. But here are my thoughts on them now that they're confirmed. First, Sungwon, good on him. Slay Bookworm. I can't believe someone said I hated him last week. Him having a Japanese speech is good for him catering to more locations, and them highlighting his goofiness with him forgetting and having to read it, off the paper, was good screen time for him, as if he needed more. I also thought it was hilarious that he had to check the numbers on the seats for Leo and Anshin because he clearly didn't remember which was which. Yeah, so once Leo and Anshin go up and sit down, you can see someone gets up, steps forward a little bit and cranes his neck around to see which one was which I thought was hilarious. Second, Anshin, good on him. Slay Child. Can't believe someone said I hated him last week. Third, Leo, duh, good on him. Him having an English speech is good. He knows how to make good tension, the showing ranking wise. Um, I don't know why I wrote it like that, but literally just he knows how to make a good show out of who was third and who was second. Fourth was Gumwoo, duh, debut confirmed. I was right, what a shocker. Fifth, Jiahao shows the power of Mnet's riggery when combined with a good performer. Got high screen time and was associated well with other trainees, and got one of the few viral moments on the show. Good job. Riggery! I love some of his fans pretending that this was organic. Like, no. Mnet liked him all along and decided that he was the one most in need of riggery for this performance. But also, the ambience in his section is really subtle but subconsciously heart rate rising. It was super creepy and weird. But I wish Mnet didn't do slow-mo on all of his body rolls. Like, if you're trying to make me like the guy, why would you show me the one thing I hate? Yeah, so I might talk about this more later. I really like Jiahao, right? I think he's a good performer. He seems like a fun guy, etc. But I really hate idols being sexy. And him being sexy was like the thing that Mnet was pushing for him. And so, they'd slow down on all of his like hip thrusts and body rolls. And I was like, please no. Please no. He's a great performer. And like I said, he really shows the power of Mnet's riggery when they use it on a good performer. Like, power through the roof. But please stop being sexy. Alright, 6, Shinlong. If Gomwoo and Jiahao rise, he has to fall, so this makes sense. Slay anyway. Not gonna lie, Mnet seriously bummed me out with the mini sob story of Zihao sending him off to the finals while he himself is eliminated. But Zihao's a king, debut him now. 7th is Junso, duh, it makes sense he'd drop considering the others went up. 8th is Sanghyun, duh, this shows the power of the interim riggery. I predict he'll fall again in the next round. Mind you, Mnet may have shot themselves in the foot by making his fandom scared. I wouldn't have done it if I were them, but maybe their data is just better than mine. I'd hope it is. He's even more on trend to be this season's Gyuvin at this rate because he didn't sit on his seat for the announcement of rank 16. Yeah, so you know how Gyuvin went like semi-viral for not sitting on his seat and just kind of sitting on the floor in the finale of Boys Planet? Sanghyun did the exact same thing in this elimination. 9th was Yumeki, an understandable rise after the interim. See my comments for Sanghyun. 10th was Liu. He's always been popular. I don't think he has a big enough one pick to be a threat to anyone in the finale, but we'll see. Also doesn't suit the alpha concept. I was mostly right about this. Like, theoretically, he was a threat to Junmin and Dongyu, but in and of himself, not really, and he didn't have a big enough one pick. 11th was Kangmin, a predictable drop considering his edit and others rising, rip. 12th was Kaiwen. This makes sense with the interim, but also getting no screen time. He may well be the only C trainee to not make the final lineup, rip, but Jiahao being so genuinely happy for him is a good look for both of them. I was right that he'd be the only C trainee to not debut. 13th was Junmin. Predictable considering the ranking interim showed him lower. He may be in need of more riggery. Speaking of riggery, everyone was praying for him to make it, and everyone was very happy for him, especially Dongyu, who has been received more positively than him. Mnet showing this is riggery. 14th was Dongyu. The bottom ranked trainee automatically gets a boost, so Dongyu going up was guaranteed. Him being high enough to survive also makes sense considering his good edits in both Bad and Lucky Macho. Dongyu Nation rise! I predicted this, but non-Dongyuers called me crazy. Anyway, he's well within reach of the top 8 with good screen time in the finale and maybe a tad of extra riggery from Mnet, i.e. an interim. I predict he will be shown in the interim. I was wrong about that. I'll talk about that more later. I don't really think I could have predicted the interim being what it was. I love how happy everyone was for him. Slay. By the way, Mnet showing how happy everyone is for him is riggery, showing how liked he is. His speech was also very good for encouraging people to vote for him. I don't remember what he said, but I trust my past self. 15th was Lee Jong. This was pre-confirmed by Mnet. He's like the best kind of trainee to have in the finale. They don't want him, and he almost certainly isn't a threat to the final group. But he is skilled, and Mnet like him. Note the distinction between them not wanting him and them not liking him. They're not the same thing. So, if he does make it into the group through some freak like accident or something, they'll be happy with him, like they were happy with Eugene in Girls Planet. His announcement in the actual episode wasn't particularly drawn out and didn't get tons of scary music or anything because it had already been announced. And 16th was Woojin, one of the last remnants of the 16-member lineup, or at least according to my hypothesis. He's in a similar spot to Lee Jong. It's very lucky for him that he survived, considering his skill level shown at the start of the show. Good on him. Also, he was a winner of the Riggery when Mnet didn't have a live survivor vote between him and Hunnam. So, Riggery! Poor guy looked super scared he was about to get tons of hate or something. He also had a very good speech. So, as I discussed last week, Mnet's anti-Hunnam, anti-Masato Riggery worked well for them, at the expense of keeping Yumeki and Sanghyun around. I guess Mnet figure either of these people would, 1, not have the one pick to debut, based on Mnet's data, or 2, not be terrible people to have in the final group as opposed to Hunnam and Masato, hence the Riggery. Poor Sanghyun looked mega depressed though. Yeah, I don't know if it's because he's young or something, but like he seems permanently depressed. What was I going to say? I agree with what I said here that they would either not have the one pick to debut or Mnet would accept them over other people. In Yumeki's case, he didn't have the one pick to debut. In Sanghyun's case, he was acceptable over other people like Kungmin. Alright, the graveyard. A big rip too. Qingwei, my poor child. Zihao the king. You will be missed. Yunso, he's too young, but he was good. Hengyu was killed by the merge, rip. I predicted this episodes ago, but at what cost? Yeah, I predicted a long time ago that he wouldn't debut, but I thought he'd at least make the finale. And Hanem, rip, if he'd been the main vocal, he wouldn't even have got lines, so I guess this is for the better. Yeah, if he'd debuted, they would have still given him no lines. And of course, a rip to the other eliminated trainees, but these are the ones that I was most depressed about. And I reckon Mnet are a little depressed too, because they'd probably like to replace Sanghyun, Liu, Kungmin, Yumeki, and Junso with the top 4 plus Hanwon. So by that I mean they'd like to replace these guys with Qingwei, Zihao, Yunso, Hengyu, and Hanwon. Because they didn't want any of these. If they had these 4 and Hanwon, their top 16 would have been entirely taken up by people they liked. Not necessarily people they wanted in the final group, duh, but people they liked. So they would have basically been sitting back and chilling. Anyway, 6. Post-elimination clips, prank, etc. This is a classic segment to make everyone depressed post-elimination. Here are some of my notes. First, confessionals for most of the eliminated trainees to make their leaving seem less sad, but there was the most screen time for Yunso, Zihao, and Masato. Also, lots of highlights of groups Mnet previously established / pairs of people they want you to feel sad about being separated. So Dongyu and Yunso, it was a bit depressing to see Dongyu call Yunso a baby. Qingwei and Yumeki, and the Chinese trainees as a group. Also some highlights for Zihao and the nice moment of Baekhyun empathizing with them, which is also a hilarious moment of Mnet hinting at self-awareness since, you know, they rigged him out. Anyway, Zihao has the best attitude on this show. King! As far as the prank to introduce Daehui and Sungwoon, I agree with pretty much everyone under the sun that those two are cool, but that the prank was so inappropriate. Maybe yelling at each other would be okay, but actually fighting on the ground is way too far. At risk of analysing people too much over the internet with only a few seconds worth of footage, I feel like most of the trainees, especially the younger ones like Sanghyun, had very intense freeze responses which made me concerned about their mental health and well-being. At the very least, it would be highly stressful for them during an emotionally fragile time anyway, and this is just another prank added to the list of inappropriate pranks done by Mnet. Like, surely they could have done something less dramatic but also less stressful? Like how that dude from 101 woke everyone up singing energetic? It was weird and quirky with funny trainee reactions, but also harmless. Or, like, could we dress Zihao as a ghost and have him run around at night or something? I think that would be especially good considering they're trying to show Dongyu and Shinlong, two people they want in the group, as scaredy cats. Anyway, this segment gave Dongyu and Gongwoo a decent amount of screen time. I'm not gonna lie, say what you want about Gongwoo, but I was ready for him to have his Avengers moment and epically defuse the fight or something, and then it just ended. He even had this whole King of the Wolves thing, and then nothing happened. Knowing Mnet, it would have been hilarious. Yeah, like, I don't know what I expected him to do, but, like, he was walking out there like he was ready to, like, he was almost squaring up. He was so ready to, like, I don't know what he was gonna do, but I was ready to see how Mnet were gonna edit it in a positive way, and then it just didn't happen. It felt so, like, I felt so disappointed I didn't get to see Gonwu punch someone or something. That sounds really bad, but, like, I just wanted to see what would happen. Alright, seventh, the final mission songs. I still don't think the trainees super like either song, but I do find it interesting seeing people's strategies when picking. Here are some that were highlighted. Woojin and Gongwoo went low so they could stay in one place. Lee Jong just wanting to dance. Dongyu just going for it and leaving it to fate. Junmin and Kaiwen just going for it. Sanghyun being an evil child and scaring Kangmin. Fear is the best strategy to get good screen time. Also picking lower than he wanted to save himself. Shinlong choosing a lower part to complement his desired killing part. Leo and Gongwoo both leaving places for the higher ranked trainees one after each other. And people like Anshin, Leo, and Sangwon wanting to try new concepts. A good move which also worked well for Ganuk. Other notes, there was Karma for Kaiwen and Sanghyun. Screen time for Sanghyun, but this was just to kind of lead into Shinlong picking. Note how we skipped right over Junso? Rip. The constant roulette of the brat attitude sub-rapper part 1. Yumeki getting pushed out of a vocal part. Rip. That was like the one thing that he needed to show. Anshin and Leo being drama-free. Dongyu's face when Sangwon looked like he'd pick main vocal was hilarious. Yeah, I think Dongyu was like terrified. This means that poor Kaiwen has to be the main vocalist of Brat Attitude, which means one of two things. One, he fails and is edited horribly to give him no chance of getting in, or two, which is far more likely, he does a perfectly fine job and since the last mission will be lip-synced anyway, it doesn't matter. I was 100% correct, it was number 2. People complained about him getting a lack of screen time, but like, did you really expect him to get screen time? He's a C trainee Mnet don't like. Alright, 8, Brat Attitude. Here is where we get introduced to the skit pranks for the leader candidates. I was kind of depressed to not see Dongyu volunteering, like, dude, take everything you can. But I guess it makes sense that he wouldn't want to go against Shinlong and Yumeki of all people. I feel like Sanghyun saying he voted for Yumeki because of snacks is weird. Like, it implies that he voted only for shallow reasons and not because of actual skills, which, considering how selfless Shinlong has been portrayed to be and how Mnet doesn't like Yumeki, seems a bit weird. Apparently other people didn't think this was weird. That's fine. I personally did though. When I say I think it's weird, I didn't think it was actually weird. I thought it was weird that Mnet would show it. It seemed like they were trying to say something shady. The actual event in and of itself is perfectly fine. It's normal. Sanghyun can do whatever he wants. But Mnet was a bit weird. Anyway. Also, did you notice the wacko inconsistency that at the start of the season, Shinlong was talking about learning choreographies slowly, but here he said he learns them quickly? Like, buddy, which is it? Yeah, I thought that was so weird. At the start, he had this big sob story about how he doesn't learn choreographies quickly, and now he's like, I learn them quickly, but other people learn them faster. Like, dude, do you learn them quickly or do you not? Anyway, other notes. Tons of Shinlong screen time, tons of Dongyu screen time and being complimented by Yumeki, plus getting to be stressed about others being good dancers, plus generally looking like he's on the edge of a breakdown, which will make you feel sorry for him and want to vote for him. This is like the last big Dongyu push. Jiahao compliments and not getting a killing part sob story, which also subtly shows his good attitude as he still claps every time. Yep, Mnet have been trying to show that he has a good attitude. Ninth is Never Been to Heaven. This is where Junmin, like Shinlong, gets a sob story of having never been the leader, and we get the test of the leader. Since both teams did this, I can only assume the staff were planting ideas in their head, especially for Kangmin and Gongwoo to fight, since they knew they could use it as a teaser. Yeah, the whole thing seemed very staged, and I don't just mean in terms of the fight was staged, because obviously it was. I mean in terms of it's awfully coincidental that considering they usually just straight up vote for the leaders, all of a sudden in the final mission the trainees are like, "Oh yo, like let's test your leadership skills with this random scenario that probably isn't going to happen anyway." Anyway, although this isn't a brilliant edit for Junmin, it does still highlight his kindness and gives him screen time, which is good. They seem to be somewhat trying to get him in by virtue of a good personality. I suppose that would make him look good in comparison to Gomwoo, who's accused of a bad personality. Other notes: Unshin and Gomwoo sob stories of not getting the killing part since the Signal song. Lots of Junmin screen time as the dance leader. Sangwon struggling with the concept. Sangwon is now a masterclass in how Mnet managed to give people struggle arcs / underdog arcs, even when they by all rights don't deserve it, him being the most popular by a large margin. If you want a really good example of this, at risk of giving you too much content to watch, go and watch my Girls Planet episodes, not the mini-sodes, the episodes. Because there I talk a lot about how trainees who by no right should have an underdog arc all of a sudden are given an underdog arc. Like, what's a good example? Was it Yes or Yes in the first mission? There was one team, or actually I think there were several, where one team was far more skilled than the other team. So, like, let's say Team 1 is more skilled than Team 2, right? And Team 1 has far more higher ranked trainees. Well, Mnet like the people in Team 1, so they will show the people in Team 1 struggling in the interim, and then they'll say that they're really bad and the other team's going to win because even though the other team are worse, they practiced more. Or they had better teamwork or whatever random BS Mnet wants to pull out. So that means that Team 1, even though they are more skilled, more popular, etc., become the underdogs, even though they by no right deserve it, or by no means deserve it. And then in the finale, or not in the finale, sorry, in the actual mission, they get to beat Team 2, even though, and like that completes their underdog arc, even though they didn't deserve to have an underdog arc to begin with because they were never the underdogs. I hope that makes sense, but that's the kind of thing Mnet do, giving underdog arcs to people who don't deserve it. Sangwon's a great example. I wouldn't necessarily say they gave him an underdog arc, but they definitely gave him struggle arcs when he didn't deserve it. Like, Sangwon was rank 1 by a massive margin the entire show. He got every single killing part. All of the other trainees loved him. The judges loved him. The fans loved him. Mnet loved him. So why is he struggling? I'll tell you why. It's because Mnet wants you to like him even more, because if Sangwon's not first, you know who's first? A Chinese trainee! And we can't have that, can we? And that is exactly the reason why they established him as being depressed and anxious in the first episode. Because then they can excuse all of his struggle arcs by just going, "Oh, guys, don't forget he's depressed and anxious. You know, depression isn't logical. Trust us, guys. He's depressed." Alright, last note is Leo concept. Leo struggling with the concept and insulting the dance? That ain't a good look. That said, him saying he isn't a good fit for the concept is good, considering the group will likely have a darker concept. Yeah, so this was really weird. Never Been to Heaven, like I saw a lot of people saying that Never Been to Heaven should have had the outfits from How to Fly, and I agree with that. But you can tell that they made the concept darker / more energetic. Like, the whole cowboy thing is darker in color and potentially darker in tone, right? Slightly. And I imagine that's because the trainees they wanted from that group, like Leo, Anshin, Sangwon, etc., those trainees suit darker concepts, so they actually adjusted the concept of the song to the trainees they wanted, which is riggory. Alright, 10, the killing parts. I don't know why, but I keep seeing Kaiwen out of the corner of my eyes and thinking he's Masato. I don't know how I manage it. Anyway, a few notes for bright attitude. Dongyu giving a message before starting. Shinlong forgetting the choreography, rip, but giving Kaiwen a thumbs up. This suggests a good attitude. And him calling himself an old man is good comedy material for him. I guess Mnet are just super stressed that he might rank too high. Yeah, so like some people said that they thought this was a snipe at Shinlong because they showed him not having the skill to be the killing part, but it wasn't. It was a snipe at Shinlong being rank 1, but they obviously still want him in the group. Like I said last episode, they don't suddenly hate him. That would be so bizarre. People not looking impressed with Yumeki, rip to him. Mnet hate him. They don't actually hate him, but they don't want him in. Jiahao desperation, and Dongyu's sudden comeback to almost be the killing part. Jiahao and Yumeki are the interim killing parts for bright attitude. Honestly, I don't know why Jiahao was so happy with this because he's been an interim killing part before and has still lost it. It seems like he was celebrating too early. Notes for Never Been to Heaven. We get a Lee Jong highlight. Bruv, I told you they like him. Woojin making mistakes. I'm kind of surprised since Mnet like him, but I suppose he is one of their least liked trainees in the top 16, and they'll take any drama they can get. Dark concept trainees stressing, which is hilarious, but mostly only because Mnet edited it to be that way. As in, if Mnet had edited it to be sinister, or as if they were lazy or stupid or something like that, it wouldn't have been funny, but because Mnet edited it to be funny, it seems harmless. I also noted that Junmin got the Ji-yoon edit of brainwashing himself to be cute, which I thought was funny in both Island 2 and in Boys Planet. Leo 1 being pathetic at cute concepts, this solidifies their worthiness in the final group, which has been given an alpha concept. So by doing this, Mnet basically say, look at these dudes we want. This is an alpha group. Look how they're literally incapable of doing anything other than an alpha concept. They must be in this group because they're made for the alpha concept. Gomwoo mistake sob story. And the votes being very spread out makes sense considering the lineup of the group. It also obviously creates tension. The killing parts for Never Been to Heaven are Anshin and Kangmin. I don't know what's up with Mnet showing that Kangmin hurt Anshin. Like, are they trying to make us vote for him to protect our precious future Magne? Yeah, so I think they shook hands or something, and Mnet pointed out that Kangmin held Anshin's hand too tight and hurt Anshin, and then I don't think he apologized, and that's just the kind of subtle ways in which they'll evil edit Kangmin. But what I'm gathering from this overall is that they must have had only 30 minutes to practice this because so many people made mistakes, especially with the choreography. I think almost everyone did. Also, the staff ordered the votes in maximum drama order. I can't imagine being a staff member whose job it is to order feedback forms for drama. What a job. Anyway, after all of this, we get the classic hard work montage and trainees talking about how much they want to make the final group, as this is one of their last pushes. And then the dramatic teaser for the finale. How dramatic, guys! 11th, we have the AO3 updates. Considering the final lineup last year was almost entirely predicted by AO3 Fix, I guess we're looking at a final lineup of Sangwon, Leo, Anshin, Kaiwen, Liu, Kangmin, Jiahao, and Junso, with Shinlong in 9th and Sanghyun in 10th. JK, this doesn't seem super likely, but I guess anything's possible. I'll have to check back next week just before the finale airs. Sangwon is still rising, but didn't gain as many Fix as I expected this week. As far as relationships go, Wonshin has almost caught up to Leo 1, then there's a massive gap of 100 Fix, and then we get to everyone else with no major changes from last week. Sangwon/Gomwoo has risen slightly. 12, the top 8 this episode, just for funsies. Sangwon, Jiahao, Leo, Gongwoo, Junmin, Dongyu, Anshin, Shinlong, and the ninth member is the trainee A Accent, which got more screen time than many trainees on this show. Hey, wait, doesn't that look familiar? 13th, the top 8 cumulative. Not a final lineup prediction, although this will likely be the majority of the final lineup. Last week, I solidified what I think is Mnet's ideal top 8 from beginning to end of the show, accounting for the merge. No changes this week, so here they are in all of their alpha glory. I'll order them roughly based on who I think was the most rigged to the least rigged, just for fun. Just before I say that, I want to point out, I don't think I actually explicitly said it in this section, but these two lineups, the top 8 for the episode and the top 8 cumulative, are exactly the same. And the reason for that is the further you go through the season, the more solidified and consolidated Mnet's editing for their top lineup is. Now, some people like to say that's because that's when they've decided on the lineup. No, they decided on the lineup months in advance. The reason it's like that is because they have to have side characters in earlier missions. And at this point, not only are there less side characters because they've all been eliminated, but also this is when they want to do their final push for the final group. And there's no point doing a final push if you don't want the trainee in the group, right? Hence why in this episode they only pushed people they actually wanted. Alright, let's talk about the riggery. First, Junmin. That's pretty obvious. He was really rigged, and I don't think he had the popularity by himself. It was all riggery. Next, Dongyu. Similarly to Junmin, he didn't have the popularity by himself. It was all riggery. But I think people, I don't know, they're pretty close, but like people liked Dongyu more because people perceived him as being less rigged, even though he was just as rigged. Next, Shinlong. Shinlong arguably would have had the popularity to make it quite far in the show, regardless. However, he's like one of the most rigged people to ever be rigged. Literally from the moment his profile picture was released, you could tell he was going to be rigged. So, riggery. Jiahao, he was pretty damn rigged. I'll talk about this more later, but everyone was like, oh, he had these viral moments. Those moments only went viral because Mnet portrayed them in the manner in which they like best suited him to go viral. So like when we talk about tambourine and chains, right? Mnet could well have cut to someone else's part during that segment. Mnet could well have framed him poorly. Mnet could have not shown judges and other trainees being shocked at his sexiness and his epic dance skills or something. Mnet could have not highlighted him in various ways, but they decided to highlight him, and that's how you can tell that they like him. If they had not highlighted him, he would not have gone viral. I can tell you that. He would still be popular. He's always been popular, but he would not have gone viral. So that's why I put him relatively high on the riggery list. Next, Gongwoo, I'll talk about this more later, but basically he was rigged by being center, and then he wasn't rigged because you don't need to rig the centers after you make them center. But then he had the scandal, so then they had to rig him again. Leo was always popular, but they still had to rig him because of the controversy. Sangwon was always popular, but they've still insanely rigged him by giving him so much screen time. And Anshin was always popular. They then rigged him by making him center, and then they basically left him be because they knew he'd be fine. So that's why he's minimal riggery. Keep in mind that they were all super rigged, but for instance, Sangwon and Anshin were popular before the show started, thus Mnet didn't need to do much work, whereas Junmin and Dongyu weren't, thus Mnet needed to work harder, to rig them that is. Gongwoo is a weird case because he initially wouldn't need to be rigged being the center, but then they needed to re-rig him after his scandal. Shinlong is another interesting one because he was always pretty popular but was still mega rigged. But also the ordering of the list is just for fun, so yeah, Basically, take it with a grain of salt. I don't actually have a solid lineup prediction because I am historically trash at them, but here are some of my very safe thoughts. 1. At least one of Dongyu Jiahao or Junmin will debut. I think it's decently likely that both Dongyu and Jiahao will. Dongyu will be shown in the interim results to boost him. Gongwoo will debut. In my opinion, Sangwon will stay at rank 1. At most, one person out of Yumeki, Sanghyun, Kangmin, Junso will debut. Woojin will rank 16th. Anshin is very likely to be the maknae. At least 2 C trainees will debut, but there is no chance of all 4 making it. Order of likelihood is Anshin, Shinlong, a decent gap, Jiahao, a massive gap, and then Kaiwen. I'll talk about my predictions, like these predictions. I revisited them next episode, so I'll talk about them then. But I do want to mention this last dot point. I really wanted to say that I thought 3 C trainees would make it, but I wanted it to be a safe prediction, so I said at least 2, but not 4. So, like, 2 or 3. Fun fact, if Jiahao makes it, he will be the first person ever to beat the first place seat curse, Slay. I kind of stuffed this up because I wouldn't necessarily say he broke the curse, because it was technically the second episode of the show to start with, but also the C show didn't follow a lot of the same, like, rules slash curses slash whatever that Produce has typically followed. A good example of that is I talked in episode 1 about how the first performance usually has someone who debuts or at least makes the finale. Yeah, so like you would expect Shongxing to debut then, right? Or at least make the finale. But obviously they didn't want him, and they didn't want him to make the finale either. So that's already that rule, which has been established for every single Produce season. Literally 0 exceptions. Every single Produce season, and then all of a sudden it's broken in the C show. And I don't believe, like, I would not consider it to actually be broken, because Shongxing was not the first performance of the show. The first performance of the show was Dongyu and my guy Rensho. So I personally don't consider that broken. Because of similar reasoning, you could argue that Jiahao didn't break the curse, but like, there's always curses being made and there's always curses being broken every single season. A lot of the time, people just make these kinds of things up because they want to like boost their trainee or make their trainee sound cooler than they actually are. So basically, it's arguable whether he beat the curse or not. You do you. Pick whatever you want. Alright, 14th, pre-finale PSA. This is my pre-finale PSA. No one will listen to me, but I guess I'm doomed to feel the need to write it anyway. If your fave isn't liked by Mnet, i.e. anyone not in the top 8 I nominated above whose name isn't also Woojin or Lee Jung, I would highly recommend you not vote them into the group unless you're prepared for them to be paid dust by week 1. If you're prepared, go for it, vote for them. But if you're not mentally / emotionally prepared for that, I'd suggest you drop them right now, because I can guarantee it will happen. Them being paid dust, that is. My examples? Easy. Yujin, Bahie, Ricky, and Gyuvin. I don't want to see anyone complaining about their fave getting no lines in this group if they voted that person in. Like, what did you expect? We've had years of evidence now to back this up. Why would you knowingly doom yourself to suffer and then complain about it? That's actual insanity in my opinion, and will also lead to the group's fandom becoming a much more toxic place. Ahem, Bahie and Ricky gays and antis. Ahem. Not gonna lie, I think I lost brain cells when I saw people vote Ricky into Zero Base 1 to spite Mnet, even having seen what happened to Bahie, and then complaining still when he got nothing, like you dug your own graves. Anyway, I don't know if I'll make a post before the finale, probably not, so considering that, I will include my hot tips here. 15, my hot tips. First, I'd recommend you bring something to distract yourself from the excessive drama. This could be as simple as a fidget toy or as complex as a crossword or something. The 10-minute long stressful periods between each rank announcement can be emotionally exhausting, so distraction can help. I personally bring a book. Hydrate. I don't know, man, this is just common sense. Breathing exercises.
If you ain't gonna distract yourself, you can at least reduce your stress. There's tons of evidence behind basically any kind of breathing exercise being good for your stress. The most popular one is box breathing, but since I absolutely hate that, I prefer breathing in for 4 counts and out for 6, 10 times. If you're seriously stressed about the finale slash are worried about hate for your favourite trainee especially, I can't recommend enough that you disconnect from social media for the day. Nothing will make you more stressed than being in an echo chamber of everyone else stressing, and there is no time when the final group will get more hate than just after the finale. Now, in the event that your favourite trainee doesn't debut, especially if it's because of an interim rank or other Mnet riggery, as hard as it is, I'd like to encourage you to try not to be bitter. As in, yeah, sure, be angry at Mnet for not favouring your pick, but it's not the fault of the debuting trainees or the fans, just Mnet. You have zero control, so there's probably not much point being angry about it. But also, you should probably be happy because if they got in and Mnet didn't want them, they would have been treated horribly and shoved to the back of the group anyway. Remember that everything will get better over time. Right now, people hate the show, and when the group and name are announced, everyone will hate the name and lineup too. Wow, what a shocker! I'm psychic. But it will get better over time. Everyone despised Kepler, but not anymore. I mean, in terms of both lineup and name. People were very unsatisfied with Zero Base 1, both in lineup and name. But now no one can imagine them any differently. There were borderline riots over Isna and the 4 produce groups, but now we all like them and we adjusted to their names too, and like the shows. Time and nostalgia do a lot. I mean, to be fair, I don't think that Isna was ever a particularly bad name, but still, lots of people hated it. And my last tip is to, as much as possible, enjoy the ride. We're watching produce history here, and I, for one, love seeing how much or how little Mnet get away with things. 16 conclusions. All I can say now is that I hope you've enjoyed my posts, and I'll see you on the other side of Bepla 2.0. I'm rooting for Dongyu and Shinlong and voting for Dongyu, even though it means nothing, and now I shall leave you with the mantra I started the series with. A critical thought a day keeps Mnet away. And we all want to keep Mnet away, don't we? Okay, so I do have a few comments I wanted to talk about here. I did talk to this person. I don't think people really liked my responses. I would not say like yeah, look, I mean just go to the thread and read my responses if you want to see my thoughts. I have nothing to add to this conversation. Underestimating K voters and Sanghyun. Yeah, I mean, look, like I said, I think that they kind of shot themselves in the foot by freaking his fans out. But like I said, they prefer him over Hanum, and they would have preferred him over X, Y, and Z trainees, which is exactly why they were okay to freak his fans out. If they really hated him enough that they didn't want him, like, let's say if they hated him to the same level they hate Ricky, they wouldn't have shown him. They would have just let him be eliminated. Okay, I thought this comment was really good because this this was an example of me kind of assuming that people know what I'm talking about and not wording things as well as I should. So the section in which I talked about how I find it wacko that people voted for Ricky even though they knew that he would be mistreated in the group is like I neglected to mention the fact that like there's two things that people should be aware of, right? The first thing is that if you vote someone Mnet doesn't like into the group, they're going to be paid dust, right? That's what I talked about. The second thing that people need to be aware of, which I neglected to mention, is that even though that person will be paid dust, the opportunity of being in a produce Mnet group is so much better than almost any other opportunity they could possibly have. I think the only example I can think of is maybe Soyeon and maybe Yeonjin from Le Seraphim. I can't think of anyone else who wasn't voted into a produce group, and or in that case rigged, wasn't rigged into a produce group, and the non-produce opportunity they had is arguably a better opportunity than the produce one they had. But for the vast, vast, vast majority of trainees, like how many trainees have we had in produce? Like approaching 1,000, and two of them have had better opportunities outside the final lineup, right? So, yes, I agree with this person. I was very thankful that they brought it up because I neglected to mention that. So, people who are complaining about Bahie and Ricky, especially, but to a lesser extent, Eugen and Guven's lack of lines, lack of visibility, etc., those people, especially Ricky fans, because they had the evidence of Bahie, I think those people are kind of crazy for complaining about his lines because you're the ones who voted him in out of spite and you knew this would happen. But then you get all when it actually happens, which was the most predictable thing ever. However, just because those people, like, it's understandable that they're not thankful at the few lines those people do get, right? I think it's silly, but it's understandable. What I don't think is understandable is people are like, save Ricky from Wake One, save Bahie from Wake One. Those two trainees are not getting better opportunities outside of Kepler and Zero Base One. Yes, they get paid dust, and yes, their fans should have known that and should not have voted them in if the fans weren't, like, if those fans themselves weren't prepared to accept that. But we should still be hyper aware, and in my opinion, we should be thankful for the fact that those people still get a better opportunity than they would have elsewhere. So, to apply this to Aldi 1, my prediction is that Sanghyun and Junso will get paid dust. But I think that their fans need to be thankful for the fact that if they hadn't debuted in this group, or if they hadn't made this group, they would have basically been Nugu forever, right? And that is the value of debuting someone Mnet doesn't like in the group. If you can accept that they will not get lines, but the group will still be beneficial to them, that is when you should vote for them. If you can't accept that they won't get lines and you can't accept that the group is valuable for them, like if you're going to be trending Aldi 1 disband, then you shouldn't be voting for that person. The other thing people like to do, and I might talk about this a bit more later, the other thing that a lot of people are really obsessed with is the idea of saying FU to Mnet and stuffing up Mnet's plans. And people always feel so victorious when they do that. They're like, we ruined Mnet's plans. Like, how cool are we? Suck it, M Snake. But you're not really saying FU to Mnet. You're kind of saying FU to yourselves and to the trainee by dooming them to receive no lines. Then again, you could argue you are saying FU to them because you take someone they like from the group and replace them with someone they don't like who will automatically get good opportunities. But, basically, do what you will, but you know what to expect, so why are you complaining about things you should have expected? Anyway, I agreed with this. I think, yeah, the value of debuting as a non-Mnet fave is not necessarily lower than not debuting at all. I would say, I think not necessarily lower is way too passive language from this person. I think this person was potentially worried about getting into an argument with me or something. Don't worry, I try not to argue with people. But, I would not say not necessarily lower. I would say the expected value of debuting as a non-Mnet fave is far higher than not debuting at all and waiting around. Yeah. Anyway,
Good comment, good on you. I thought this comment was funny. I'll talk about this more later. But like, no, Jiahao's rise to popularity was not organic. It was not because of his blinding talent alone. Um, he literally was, like, I know this person's trying to say that I'm crazy, but he literally was pushed from the start. He wasn't even hidden, he wasn't low key. He was just pushed. Um, anyway, I also am not sure what was shady, but I knew that if I responded, this person would probably get into an argument with me, so I didn't respond. Um, I had an interesting conversation about Gongwu. I think I said this in previous episodes, but like I said, Sangwon and Shinlong seem to love Gongwu, right? So you either believe that they're bad judges of character, and K-pop fans don't like believing bad things about their biases, or you believe that all three of them are good people, or all three of them are bad people, right? It seems a bit odd to me to support two of them, but not the third, or vice versa, like to support Gongwu, but not Sangwon and Shinlong, unless you think that one person is a bad judge of character, which most people don't seem to believe. Most people seem to think Shinlong's a very good person and a good judge of character. Yeah, people were talking about the fact that I read a book in the finale. I don't know what to say, guys. I like reading, and I like reading before bed, and Boys Planet, because I live in Australia and it airs at nighttime in Korea, it airs late at night for me. And that's my reading time, and I don't appreciate the fact that Boys Planet takes away from my reading time. So, as much as possible, I try to read in, like, during the episode. Yeah, I'll talk about this more. It was not organic. He was not organic. I had no clue what's going on here. Like, okay, so today's post is very biased. What about my other posts? That's my first question, because I feel like I write the same for all of my posts. So I'm genuinely curious. Like, I knew this person wouldn't explain because they said I'm too lazy to debunk. First of all, what needs debunking on my post? But what is so biased about today's post as opposed to the previous ones? That's my question. Anyway, look, like I said, human beings must have bias. It is impossible to not have bias. If you want to learn more about that, you can go and watch episode 1 that I made about historiography. There's a historiographer. Gosh, it's been a while since I made that episode. Von Ranke. He was obsessed with objectivity. And he was like, historians must strive to be 100% objective. And he really believed that objectivity was possible. But what you learn when you study historiography, especially, but any kind of history, arts, languages, culture, whatever field, you learn that it is literally impossible to not be biased. Everything that you know and perceive comes through your brain, and your brain has its own particular schemas for how it adapts things, and your brain interprets things in different ways. Oh, sorry, I hit my microphone. Because you're constantly filtering every piece of information through your brain, which has been trained for years. I mean, if you're watching this video, you understand language. If you understand language, you are probably like older, let's say older than like 3 years old, right? You have already by that age developed certain schemas in your brain. So most of my audience are apparently like the 18 to 24 range. So those of us in that age range, let's just say you're definitely biased, and it's impossible for you to not be biased. And because I'm aware of that, that's why I try to point out my bias. Because that's what I personally took away from historiography and from extension history in high school, is you can never be 100% objective. A better approach
is to not, like, there's not even necessarily a point in trying to be objective because you can't achieve it. So, to a certain extent, why would you try? So, my personal approach is less than being objective, I want to acknowledge my bias and acknowledge the fact that I am biased. If I can do that, then people will be aware that they should take what I'm saying with a grain of salt. And we go from there, you know? Anyway, so look, I said that to them. I also said I've had a few people confused about this. I write from Mnet's perspective, uh, how they want you to interpret the whatever it is, the edit, whatever, because I think that's the most interesting perspective. Um, I didn't understand this comment. I have no clue what's going on here. I also so biased on certain trainees that it looks more like a hate post. I desperately want to know who these people think that I'm hating on and how this is a hate post and who it's a hate post for. I have had a few people in the past say that they think I'm making hate posts for certain trainees, but I genuinely, unless the person says who they think I'm hating, I never can figure it out because I don't write my posts with any intentions of hate. I write my posts with neutrality towards the vast majority of trainees, and then there's a few that I like. So, like, obviously, when I write my posts, you can tell that I'm biased towards Ganuk, Shinlong, Dongyu, etc. But everyone else I feel mostly neutral towards. Um, there's enough hate towards trainees that I don't think I need to contribute to it, and I don't hate trainees anyway. So I always get confused about these comments. I also don't feel like everyone's glazing me, but if you think everyone's glazing me, you can let me know in the comments. This person commented after the previous one saying, like, of course you're biased. This is a survival show, we all have our picks. I appreciated this person saying that I am pointing out riggery towards my picks and exposing Mnet. I mean, I don't think I'm exposing Mnet, but this is exactly what I mean. That bias is not necessarily bad. All humans need to have bias. I try to acknowledge my bias. So it obviously makes sense for me to acknowledge that, for instance, Gunnock was rigged. More people are telling me that I'm crazy for saying that Jihao was pushed. This was an interesting comment. I feel bad. It looks like they've been downvoted, but I don't think this comment was bad at all. I think this was just like someone kind of being passively brainwashed by their own Reddit echo chamber. This person is basically saying that they're wondering if the riggery works more on K voters or G voters because the K voters top 8 have been rigged, right? They're suggesting, maybe things are better understood by K viewers, like Mnet's intent is better understood, or Mnet are catering towards K fans more. And I mean, you can read my response, but like I said, both Korean and international audiences are affected by riggery, and both tend to do what Mnet wants them to do. It's just that the Korean voters, at least from the impression I've received on the English speaking internet, don't seem to care if people say that they're biased or being affected by riggery, they just go for it. But international audiences like to pretend that they're immune to the riggery. They'll go, oh, this person was rigged. And that's probably one of the reasons why there's so many Junmin, like, borderline hate posts, like, oh, he was so rigged. They pretend that they're, like, enlightened and immune to the rigging. But then there's still a whole bunch of people who start liking that trainee. So they're not actually, which is interesting. I also have no clue what's going on here. Like, is this a positive comment or a negative comment? Obviously, people have interpreted this as negative, but what? I also don't know what's going on here. Thank God the AO3 prediction was off. What was the AO3 line of? Like, I don't think it was that bad. It did change before the finale. So the AO3 lineup a week out was Sangwon, Leo, Anshin, Kaiwen, Liu, Kangmin, Jihao, Junso. Look, I mean, obviously that doesn't have either of my two picks in it, but like, I don't think that's a bad lineup. I mean, people would destroy it, people would tear it to shreds, but I think it's fine. Anyway, point is, it completely changed in a week, so let's talk about it. Episode 11. Ah, well, here we are. On the downside, Dongyu Nation, I'm sorry, I've failed you. On the upside, Rencho and Zihao got so much screen time this episode. Slay! In other news, bwahaha, I'm almost always right. I will forever reign as the master of Mnet. Alright, 1. The finale structure. Yeah, so this isn't rocket science, but obviously these things are designed to be drawn out as much as possible, and they sprinkle in little announcements, the group name, the centers of each song, etc., for drama. They also, of course, have the double weighted voting in the finale, which is their last push to get trainees they like into the group. Second intro and the last words segment. I don't actually know if that's what it was called, but that's what it was called on Boys Planet 1, so I just used the same title. Gomu and Anshin were used for Ola Sola. This just really solidifies how much Mnet want these two specifically for this group. In So we don't know for Boys Planet 1 because it was Hanbin and Junghao who were the top rank in each group in the third elimination. But in Girls Planet, they used the top trainee in the last elimination for the center of the signal song in the finale. So in that case, it was still Dion and Jiating, but they replaced Hikaru with Mashiro. So theoretically here they would have used Anshin and Sangwon, but they still chose to use Gomwoo, which shows how much they want him. The last words segment starts with Gomwoo, which makes him salient in your mind, and he gets a whole sob story about his last chance. He's also associated with Anshin, of course. The transitions between trainees were used to create pairs Mnet likes to push, kind of. They showed Gomwoo Anshin, Sangwon Leo, Junmin Dongyu, and Sanghyun Liu. They don't want either Sanghyun or Liu in the group, but I think they have enjoyed milking the pair for the possibility of them being separated. They did a lot of that during this episode. Looking back, I predict it was partially to encourage people to vote for Sanghyun, because there was a possibility that Kangmin would slip into the group and they didn't want that. They'd rather have Sanghyun. Also, when they showed Dongyu's, his was pretty unique. He talked about staying by people and serving the star creators. This is interesting because it's a selfless motivation, which was presumably included to make him seem better in comparison to everyone else who had selfish motivations, wanting to debut. Dongyu is shown to be fan-oriented, which is important. Rip Dongyu. So when I say selfish motivations, there's a reason it's in quotes. Wanting to debut is not an inherently selfish motivation, but it's a very me motivation. Like, no one says, I don't even know how you'd say it that's not me oriented, but the point is, everyone says, I want to debut, right? Where, like, I want to achieve something for myself, right? Is the rough implication. Certainly in individualistic societies. For Dongyu, he says, I want to debut so that I can serve the fans. I want to stay by your side. I want to give you hope, whatever, whatever. And that's a much more selfless framing of that situation. 3. The second live segment and fortune telling. Does no one else find it wacko that there's 5 members of 101? I mean, I guess it makes sense. And Isna is there to cheer on their brother group, presumably, but there's no Kepler or Zero Base One? Like, where were they? Apparently they were at festivals or something, but I still find it weird that they weren't there. As far as the fortune telling, here's lots of screen time for Leo, associated with Sangwon. Gongwoo by himself for maybe extra screen time credit, Jia Hao for more compliments, and kind of Dongyu and Lee Jong. Rip Dongyu. Fourth, the Masters Party and the Interim. Here comes the mandatory section where we worship the Masters and they pretend to cry. There was a surprising amount of Junso screen time in this section. It honestly made me wonder whether they were showing him in the same way they often show people before they're eliminated, but I guess it was positive foreshadowing, not negative foreshadowing. Having said what I said earlier about Sanghyun, I kind of wonder if this was to make people vote for Junso more over Kangmin. So by showing a decent amount of Sanghyun and Junso, they can ensure that they get into the group over Kangmin and Liu. Anyway, there's also a bunch of Shinlong screen time and references to episode 3, and a classic big long Sangwon speech. As far as the interims, we've reached the part of the show where the judges basically aren't allowed to criticise anyone anymore. Mnet needs to show us that whether or not they want these people in the group, they're all talented, because otherwise, well, they wouldn't be able to justify having them in the final group, right? So basically everything goes relatively smoothly. We do have a few final pushes for trainees they like. Mnet give Leo lots of screen time and a stress story about not being cute, and they give Junmin a nice moment where he talks about how he's grown and has gained confidence, which the masters also tie to him being a hard worker, a good push for his idol personality. Fifth, the group name. For those who didn't see, the group name is Alpha Drive 1 or Aldi 1, which supposedly means something along the lines of the drive to be the best team and passion. And like, yeah, it's bad, and Alpha 1 would have been better, but like, trust me. One, people will be nostalgic for this name in the future and will think Aldi 1 is a cute name. The abbreviation is always cuter than the full name. And two, trust, the next boy group name will be worse. I feel like the boy group names are getting worse over time, with the exception of X1. I feel like the boy group ones are always worse than the girl group ones. I mean, Isna was pretty good in my opinion and has fun meaning, which was also the best part of their debut. Anyway, I'm satisfied with it, although I'm with the group of people who want to abbreviate it to just Alpha. Jimin, however, looked absolutely horrified. The picture of Hengyu and I think it's Surin looking horrified has been tossed around a lot, but I think Jimin looks like traumatized. Anyway, sixth is Brat Attitude. A final push for Jiehao, Shinlong, and Dongyu, Rip Dongyu, featuring tons of Shinlong and Dongyu being cute cowards and doing their best to overcome their fears, Rip Dongyu. There was a very unsurprising lack of Kaiwen screen time. I don't know why people complained about this like it wasn't obvious it would happen. Also, lots of compliments for Dongyu and Jiehao. Rip Dongyu. Unsurprisingly, Jiehao got the killing part over Yumeki, and there was lots of screen time for him and Dongyu in the performance. Rip Dongyu. Seventh, Never Been to Heaven. They clearly don't feel the need to push as much for this one, because the screen time was far more even, but there was still definite important screen time for Sangwon, Anshin, and Leo. There was some Maknae type editing of Anshin. I don't know what the point of that was. He wasn't in any position to push Sanghyun out, but I guess it's nice considering he'll be the second Maknae of the group. We also got a little bit of Anshin being nervous and lacking confidence. Also, Anshin obviously got the killing part, which interestingly means that both of our centers for the finale were Chinese. Insane, man. Zero Kangmin screen time though, and lots of cheers on set for Leo Won. No one was surprised. Eighth is Jaejung, Chunbei, and Eliminated Trainee concert. RIP, everyone thought it was a concert for their parents. Anyway, I saw a lot of people flaming Jaejung for supposedly being a terrible host, but I think that he's been literally just as bad / good as every other host we've had lately. I mean, every finale host. His hands were also shaking, so I can only assume he was nervous. Anyway, Chunbei screen time. I don't have any notes on the Chunbei snack making segment except that it had more of Maknae Anshin. The Eliminated Trainee concert was when I noticed the on and off blurring of the North Face logos, which has been happening throughout the series, but which I don't think has ever happened within the same episode before. Like, Anyway, this gave them the chance to highlight a bunch of people, and at this point they can basically do whatever they want since the live voting has closed. There was a bunch of Renshow screen time, which I appreciated, of course, as an OG Renshow stan. The fact that the peer evaluation was actually letters of support was very obvious to anyone who's watched a show like this before. Literally, as soon as the trainees, like the eliminated trainees, started writing on their paper, I was like, yep, they're writing letters of support. I have a few small notes. Dongyu acting as a pseudo leader and reading out the letters, Rip Dongyu. Wib Wump. Sangwon being depressed. I hope you didn't forget he's depressed. Gomwoo getting screen time and being complimented for being good looking. Ahem, that reminds me of episode 1. We also got a bit of Shinlong and Zihao, which I obviously appreciate, but is it just me, or did Never Been to Heaven get way more screen time in this segment than Brat Attitude? Yeah, they wanted more people in Never Been to Heaven, so 5 of their ideal lineup are in Never Been to Heaven, and only 3 of them, Dongyu, Jihao, and Shinlong, are in Brat Attitude. And don't forget, 2 of those people are Chinese. And you know how Mnet feels about Chinese people. So, yeah, like, obviously they'd have more screen time for Never Been to Heaven. But as a Shinlong and Dongyu stan, I was not very impressed. Alright, 9th How to Fly and trainee interviews. I actually really liked the staging of How to Fly with the segmented raised stage making wings. I feel like the image on the stage was a bit meh, but the idea was nice, I guess. I noted Dongyu getting an ending fairy and someone screaming their lungs out for Sungwon. Rip Dongyu. As far as the trainee interviews, I saw some people complaining about these and they were certainly a bit awkward, especially the one with, I think, Hui-chan, where Jaejung kept insisting that he said who he voted for, but it was definitely scripted on Jaejung's part. The other thing I didn't note here is that, like, those interviews had to be long enough for the trainees to get changed into their uniforms and, like, get their hair and makeup redone and everything. So Jaejung was probably just told to draw it out as much as possible. Here are my notes. Zihao continues to be a philosopher, or more like a king whose attitude is the best on the show. Yunso missing Kangmin the most. I didn't expect that one, honestly. Zihao having to prompt Yunso to list everyone's names. Yunso has been adopted by another Hyung, and at this point he may as well become a member of Boy Story. He should join now that Shinlong's gone. I found it so weird that they told Yunso to name every single trainee, like it's... If he even slightly hesitates on someone's name, which he did, it's not a very good look for him, so you're kind of setting him up for failure. Hui Chen's awkward interview, Rip. In the end, he revealed that he was voting for Gomwoo, but both him and Yunso gave very diplomatic answers to questions. Harry, hi! And Masato supporting Junso. 10th, the sleepover. Everyone got pretty equal screen time, as in no one got a massive push, but some people like Kaiwen still got basically nothing. The only things I have to note here are, we got some BTS details of Gomwoo and Anshin having to film the planet intros together. You know I love hearing BTS details, so this was fun to hear about. Mini Anshin maknae edits, and Sangwon and Sanghyun bonding, very appropriate considering what happened next. 11th, we have the AO3 update. I checked the AO3 page at 6 PM KST, which was 2 hours before the episode, to obtain AO3's final group prediction, which was as follows. I didn't write it down, so let me read it out here. Sangwon, Anshin, Leo, Kaiwen, Jiahao, Kangmin, Liu, Junso, and then Shinlong in 9th and Gomwoo in 10th. This actually had a decent number of changes when compared to last week, showing how this prediction keeps changing as the show continues, even right to the end. Here are my notes. Sangwon has soared to over 400 fix, more than Leo and Anshin combined. Anshin overtook Leo compared to last week. They've been running back and forth quite a bit, but have been pretty close for a long time. There's no clear Halbin this season. By that I mean, like, there's the trio ship, or the 2 ships that include the trio of dudes. Halbin, like, except for the few Matbin people, like, Halbin are just head and shoulders above everyone else. Head, shoulders, torsos, feet. Liu, who had been near the top for weeks, was overtaken in order by Kaiwen, Jiahao, and Kangmin. the massive rise of Kaiwen, he had plus 50-ish fix, and Jia Hao plus 50-ish fix. Kangmin gained around 30. I don't know where these came from because they weren't shipped together, so I don't know what's going on. Junso dropped to 8th. Shinlong is still at 9th after last week. I guess he's not very shippable, which I appreciate. Sanghyun dropped off the top 10 list entirely and was replaced by Gongwoo. Gongwoo has been on and off the list pretty constantly. Shinlong gained 34 fix this week, which is pretty good as far as non-Leo Wonshin trainees go. This means AO3's final lineup prediction is Sungwon, Anshin, Leo, Kaiwen, Jiahao, Kangmin, Liu, and Junso. Alright, now for relationships, which gives further insight into the above list. Oh, this is just the relationships. Me having to remove Halbin multiple times may have had an effect on this, but I don't think it would be big. This shows that, like I said earlier, there isn't a Halbin this season. Instead, the Leo Wonshin love triangle sans the Anshin Leo pairing. So yeah, this love triangle is taking over instead. Surin / Zihao and Kaiwen / Hanwen are still going strong by virtue of having gained many fix early and by virtue of no ships outside of Leo Wonshin really being popular. Yeah, so if you look at them, you can see that Leo Wonshin have like 160 something and then it's 40. Like less than a quarter. And, you know, interestingly enough, Zihao and Surin kept getting more fix even after they both got eliminated. I think it's just because everyone likes them. They're likable characters. And I say characters because that's what they are to Mnet. And like neither of them were viable options for the final group as they were edited. They were just comic relief, but they were really good comic relief and everyone loved them. Which honestly, considering Mnet didn't want them in the group, I feel like really good comic relief that everyone likes is about as good as your edit can get. So good on them. All of the other ships are basically the same as last week, and there's nothing to note. I've never been involved in shipping culture within a produce season, this season included, but is it just me, or is this season really boring ship-wise? At least on the international front. I feel like Girls Planet at least was way more invested. Mind you, this season arguably hasn't been nearly as gay as Girls Planet or Boys Planet 1, so I don't know. Yeah, I feel like the shipping went way harder in Girls Planet and Boys Planet 1. So I don't know what's going on there. Island 2, I don't think there was like any, but most of those trainees were very young anyway, so that's probably a good thing. Alright, 12th ranks and announcements. Rip Dongyu. Am I crazy or has the reveal of the trainees never been this dramatic? I mean, the pulsing lights. So by that I mean the moment they appear on stage for the first time just before the announcement starts. Like the light sticks flashed, the whole hall flashed. Like on Boys Planet 1, didn't they just kind of show up? And the same thing happened on Girls Planet, but here it's like flash, flash, flash. They're coming, they're coming. Oh, look, they're here now. Wow. Can I please take a moment to note that Mnet put a subtle heartbeat sound in the soundtrack when we're waiting for a trainee announcement, which is obviously designed to make you stressed. Now, I must apologise to those of you who read last week's post. I didn't follow up on my promise to read a book because instead of reading in between announcements, I was busy writing this post. Sorry. Yeah, I wanted to get it out on the night of because then I was working the day after and then I had a busy weekend. Anyway, I watched the very, very live stream while I was watching the regular live stream and doing this post, and the very, very live stream was slightly ahead of the one I was watching, so I got to see their reactions and hear people's names slightly before they were announced on my live stream, which was interesting and fun. What was less fun was seeing them slowly lose hope for Kangmin. During the finale, I voted for Dongyu because I knew Shinlong was safe, and I thought, may as well. Rip Dongyu. Sad face. And rip Dongyu Nation. I'm sorry, please forgive me. I'll talk about this more in a bit. Interestingly enough, Boys Planet 1 skipped announcing candidates for the final spot because it was late and baby Maknae Yujin had to go home, but here they've brought it back for mandatory drama. Anyway, here are my thoughts on the general ranks. I'll get into the whole group later. First, Sangwon, I don't know what to say, no one was surprised at all. Bookworm Slay? Second, Anshin, he had a hilarious speech, and the very, very members were laughing at him too. Rip. Those fans of his who told me I was crazy to think he wouldn't drop? Bwahaha, I'm always right. Shinlong expected Slay. Shinlong fans were telling me I was crazy he'd be high up, but I knew that after receiving the edit of all edits on survival shows, he'd be fine. I'm always right. It was nice to see Zihao so happy with him. Zihao the king! So like I said, I released this like less than a minute after the episode ended. Since then, we've seen all of the different angles of Zihao and Shinlong hugging and Zihao reacting when Shinlong got announced and everything. And first of all, it's so awkward that the camera crew was just right up in Zihao's face the whole time. Like the poor guy's having like a mental breakdown. And the camera's like, oh yeah, he's crying, oh yeah. All I want to say is like all the different angles just really emphasize how all the angles really just emphasize how proud Zihao was. So good on them, you know. Fourth was Gonwoo. I accepted him as part of the lineup 8-ish weeks ago, so I was 0% surprised. In fact, I was kind of surprised he was so low. I'm always right. Fifth was Jiehao. You all told me I was crazy that he could debut. Well, look at him now. Wahaha, I'm always right. It was nice to see Zihao so happy with him too. Zihao the king. Jiehao broke the rank 1 seat curse, I talked about this earlier, which is crazy and great of him, but I'm already seeing people lose brain cells and call him Ricky. Guys, he isn't Ricky. What made Ricky Ricky was that Ricky debuted at a high rank while Mnet hated him, but Mnet liked Jiehao, so Jiehao isn't a Ricky. He's more of a, Junghao? Hikaru type? Sixth is Leo. I'm not surprised that he fell, but I'm presently surprised to be proven wrong with my prediction that he wouldn't debut. Aussie, Aussie, Aussie. Seventh is Sanghyun. In the end, I wasn't particularly surprised that he debuted, honestly. He has a big Korean fan base, and as I have said many times throughout the show, out of the quote dozen trio, which was him, Liu, and Masato, he was always going to be the most likely to debut because he has the biggest Korean fan base and has the best stage presence out of the three. He's also arguably not a dozen because he can rap, but you know, when people complained about Leo and Masato, sometimes he was tacked on as well. I think he's the best fit out of the three of them for the Alpha group, and that's one of the reasons Mnet decided to allow him in. And when I say allow, I really mean allow. They allowed him by making sure he didn't get eliminated in the third elimination round. That said, he will be the Guven of this group, so Sanghyun fans, prepare yourselves for him to get almost no lines and almost no screen time. Following up from my message last week, I hope you are aware of the fact that this is an amazing opportunity for him, but that he probably won't be treated well. People were like, oh, they wanted him because he's a Wake 1 trainee, oh, they wanted him because, they'll treat him well because of Wake 1. No, they didn't want him. Gonwoo was the Wake 1 trainee they wanted. Eighth is Junso. I was a bit surprised, but not tons. Similarly to Sanghyun, his fans should be prepared right now for him to become the G-Wing of the group and get minimal lines. Just read my paragraph for Sanghyun again, I guess, minus the dozen stuff. Actually, there's a very real possibility that Junso becomes the leader of the group. Mnet have shown him to be a skilled leader, or at least they did when he was leading the 2-star trainees, and their other main options for leader, which are Dongyu, Junmin, Leo, and Gongwoo, either didn't debut or are controversial. Rip Dongyu. As far as ranks 9 through 10, I'm not going to lie, I was less depressed watching Kangmin and more depressed watching the very, very live stream. They and all of the staff were pretty depressed. I feel vaguely satisfied that I predicted from the start of the show that Kangmin wouldn't debut, and I think he gave a nice speech. I think it's time for Very Very to release a banger of a comeback, send all of the members to the military, and come back in a few years refreshed or something. But regardless, good effort, Kangmin. Ye fought Mnet well, I guess. Apparently Very Very are going to have a comeback, so I predicted it. Woohoo! Sanghyun was clearly upset about Liu being 10th, which is fair, but I do find it Ironic, perhaps, that there were so many fans who wanted the two of them to debut together, but who voted Sanghyun into the group while not voting Liu in. Like, you dug your own grave. The Very Very Squad had a very strange reaction to him. I think they were really confused for some reason. I have no clue why. Just before I talk about the ending, I want to talk about the people who got eliminated because I didn't talk about it here. Mostly because we didn't know their ranks, and I wanted to wait to talk about the ranks. What I wanted to talk about is like why I think they didn't debut. So let's start with Kangmin. Okay, first of all, I predicted Kangmin wouldn't debut from episode 1 and people called me crazy. Well, joke's on you. Reason Kangmin didn't debut is, first of all, evil edits, duh. Second of all, he's an experienced idol who has a group to go back to. So he's automatically got the disadvantage of some of his fans will want him to go back to Very Very as opposed to joining the new group. That's what happened with Hui as well. If Kangmin had left Very Very before the show, I think he would have debuted. But because he was still part of the group, I feel like that might have pushed him over the edge to not debuting. The other thing that experienced idols struggle with is most of the time people want to watch a survival show because they want to discover new talent, right? Maybe I'm crazy, but I feel like that's a big reason why people watch them. I mean, that's kind of the whole point of Produce, or ostensibly the point of Produce. But when you're already following a debuted idol, it's very easy for that idol's fans to fall into the idea that, oh, maybe like I should vote for someone who hasn't had a chance to debut yet. You know, with Kangmin, right, it doesn't matter how much he wanted to be part of Aldi 1. What matters is that he has already debuted. People like Jiahao, Sanghyun haven't. I'm not saying those are the people that Kangmin fans voted for, but I'm saying that those people get a boost because to be a debuted idol and to re-debut in one of these shows, you have to be like mega desperate and you have to show your fans that they will never see you again if they don't vote for you. And that's one of the reasons I think Someone leaving Nine Eye before Boys Do Planet was such a smart decision. Because Kangmin still has a chance to do well in Very Very, and Very Very are like a decently well-known group, there's no real reason for people to vote for him. Like, I don't want to sound like mean or anything because I like Kangmin and I like Very Very and I really enjoyed watching them on the show. But why would I vote for Kangmin when I could vote for Dongyu who's never debuted, right? Whenever I feel bad about people getting eliminated on these shows, it's because I feel sad that they didn't get the chance to debut. And that's why, like, I talked about this in my Girls Planet episodes. All of my picks got a chance to experience some sort of idolhood, right? Even if it was as little as like Zian, for instance, she's released a few songs, but she's never really been like she's always been like about as nugu as you can get, or whatever the Chinese equivalent of nugu is. Um, who's the other person? Uh, Manami, for instance. Manami never debuted, but she hosted some idol show or something. So she was still involved in the culture. She still got to experience something. And obviously, that's nowhere near as good as what she would have got if she debuted in Kepler. But at least she got the experience. She can say that she's done it, and then she can move on with her life. As opposed to if she never got to do anything ever and might get stuck on it, which is one of the reasons why I think it's good for as many members of the final group as possible to be new trainees. Obviously, it's not always that way. In fact, it's almost never that way. Um, and we have, oops, sorry, we have what? Two debuted idols, Shinlong and Junso, in this group. Um, but they had the desperation that Kungmin was not perceived to have. Anyway, that's why he didn't debut. Liu, look, like I said, anyone who's labeled a dozen, automatically their chances of debut are massively lowered. Liu had the connections to Sanghyun. He had a bit of decent screen time in the first mission. Um, and he's generally like cute and liked by Korean fans, so he got to stay, but he basically had zero chances of debuting. Yumeki, he's another one who I said wouldn't debut from episode 1, and people said I was crazy, and oh, his Japanese one pick is so big. Dude, no one cares about your Japanese one pick. It's your Korean one pick that people care about, and he doesn't have that, so too bad, so sad. That sounds really bad. I like Yumeki, but I predicted from the start that he wouldn't debut. Um, he wouldn't have debuted regardless, but what he could have done to improve his chances is not just do rap. Or did he do rap in the last mission? Yeah. The entire show, he just did rap, and he only did small rap parts. Now in the final mission, yes, he was pushed out, so he didn't get to do what he wanted to do, which was a vocal part. But for the other missions, like, do tell me, Yumeki, if for some wacko reason you watch this video, please do tell me why in the world would you pick a dance song for the second mission? Everyone knows you can dance. Are you actually insane? He should have picked a vocal or rap, preferably vocal, song for that mission. Picking a dance song, like, he basically, because he had such small parts and did a dance song in the second mission, he was basically a backup dancer the entire time. And Yumeki's whole thing is that he wants to not be a backup dancer, he wants to be an idol. He has to prove that to people. And the fact that he kept letting himself be a backup dancer does not prove to people that he wants to be an idol. So anyone who was like predisposed to think positively of him and vote for him, if they see him doing that, they're going to be like, well, he's not actually genuine about it. And that's one of the reasons he didn't debut. The other reason he didn't debut is, like I predicted, I knew he'd be a Hui type, and I was correct. They edited him like Hui. He's too good for the show. Why don't you, the audience, vote for someone who's more deserving of the first chance to debut? As in, like, someone whose career is on the line. Yumeki's career isn't on the line. Lee Jung, look, he just didn't debut because Mnet liked him, but they didn't rig him enough. Same as Junmin. Oh, cute, they're next to each other. Junmin, I predicted from the first time I labelled him a Park Hanbin, I thought that he wouldn't debut because Park Hanbin didn't debut. The fans just don't seem to be really interested in this kind of performer, which is weird because I personally like them. I mean, I wouldn't say, like, they're not my bias level or anything, but I really like Park Hanbin. He smiled at me in real life. And Junmin's the same, so I knew he wouldn't debut. Rip Riggery. Chen Kai-wen, honestly, I don't know how he made it so far. He got almost no screen time. He got some positive screen time being complimented by Yumeki in the second mission, but he was basically a non-character, so it was obvious he wouldn't debut. Dongyu. Oh, Dongyu, no! Okay, the reason Dongyu didn't debut, I would say, is because what Dongyu needed to debut was a viral main vocal high note moment. And he never got one because Mnet stuffed up and didn't give him one. Him being the main vocal in Lucky Macho was really good. I think Dongyu played the show really well because he did rap in the audition and also got to showcase his vocals. He did rap in the first mission, he did dance in the second mission, and he did vocals in the third mission, and then vocals in the finale. I think Mnet should have made Dongyu do the main vocal part for Brat Attitude. I don't think that would have made him debut, but they should have made him do that because then he would have had that high note that Kaiwen had, and that would have pushed him up. The other problem he had is Lucky Macho didn't really have a high note. It had that whole falsetto thing, but it didn't have a high note. And when K-pop fans, especially on survival shows, are looking for a main vocalist, they're looking for someone who can do an epic high note. That's why Mnet picked Tere. Yeah, Lucky Macho didn't have a proper high note, and I think that's one of the reasons Dongyu didn't debut. I think if Lucky Macho had had some epic high note, Mnet could have edited that so that it would go viral, and then I think he would have debuted. Yeah, but it's really unfortunate that, the main vocal stuff came too late. Now were saying to me like, oh, Mnet don't want Dongyu because they didn't push him earlier, or he's got no chance because it's too late in the competition for him to get one picks. Jiahao is evidence that that's not the case. Suyeon is evidence that that's not the case. Dongyu was more than capable of debuting. I just don't think that Mnet picked the right moments to push him. I think it's very clear that they wanted him, and I think the fact that he rose so much, like he went from 29th to 14th in the finale, that's pretty good, man. Oh no, sorry, he was 15th. It's still pretty good. And it's quite likely that he was 10th in the or 10th or 11th in the third elimination interims before all of Mnet's riggery. So, like, all of that indicates that he did gain a pretty large fandom based on their editing of him later in the show. I don't think he would have debuted if he'd been edited well in the first mission. I don't think that would have affected it. I just think he needed a stronger main vocal edit. He got a really good leader edit, he got a good personality edit, but what the fans were looking for was a main vocalist, and Mnet should have been more aware of that. So they fumbled the bag, and I'm not very impressed with them because, Rip Dongyu. Rip Dongyu. Lastly, Woojin. Look, Woojin just straight up did not have a big enough one pick to debut, and Mnet knew it. They literally just kept him because they like him overall, and they prefer him to Masato, Hanum, etc. He was a tool for their riggery, but he was obviously never going to debut. Pretty simple, in my opinion. Alright, let's talk about the ending. Right at the end, they got everyone to step down from the stands and stand in a line, which was bizarre. Like, they'd never done that before, but I guess it is what it is. Mnet needs to shake it up. Also, the Planet C teaser was weird. Like, they're interrupting everyone's depressing crying time to announce that, hey, the C trainees, of which only one was left over after this episode, but not the K trainees for some reason, have another chance. All of the trainees looked mega confused. But I suppose it was dramatic, and if Mnet like one thing, it's drama. Anyway, the very, very live stream was touching but depressing. 14th, we have the overall group and riggery. Okay, so what are my thoughts on the overall group? I'm fine with it. I'm obviously very happy that Shinlong debuted, which I called from episode 1. I may as well talk about it now. You could tell that Shinlong would debut, and you could tell that he would be rigged from the moment his profile picture was released. You know how I said that I've been watching the live, like the first Survivor elimination or final Survivor eliminations with my colleague. Obviously she got at least like a tiny little bit invested. And so she asked me about the final group, and I showed her, and she instantly said, "Oh, that guy looks like he's a star." And she pointed at Shinlong. She's like, "That guy looks like I have never seen him perform, but he is a talented performer, and he like has the aura and the star power that he needs." This sounds like a Reddit fake story or a Tumblr fake story or something. I swear it's not. But the reason she said that, I reckon, is because if you look at the headshots of the members, they're all like very boring. And then you've got Shinlong, who's got the red hair and the contacts. Like, of course, he's going to stand out. And I think I mentioned this in the episode 1 post that I made. Like, you can tell that he was going to be rigged. You could tell that Mnet wanted him because they gave him the contacts and the hair to stand out, and then they gave him tons of screen time. The fact that some random, I don't want to like, obviously she's my colleague, right? But as far as K-pop, she's some random person who doesn't know anything about K-pop. The fact that she can look at the lineup and go, "Oh, that guy looks like he's a star," that shows how effective Mnet's riggery of Shinlong was right from the first moment we were introduced to the trainees. Um, yeah, so that's why I was able to call it in episode 1 because it was so obvious from the start. And I'm obviously happy that Jiahao, Leo, and Sungwon debuted. Obviously, I'm depressed that Dongyu didn't make it, but as the mandatory Suyeon of this season, I'm sure he'll be okay. Rip Dongyu. I don't know if I said this earlier, but like, I'm upset that Dongyu didn't make it, but I'm not invested enough in this show to say that I'm devastated. I feel like if you're devastated, you possibly need to take a step back from this show. Dongyu was my one pick, guys, and he didn't make it, and I'm not devastated, I'm just a bit miffed, I guess. I'm overall satisfied with everyone else. I didn't have an ideal lineup for this season since I was so focused on Mnet's lineup, so let's talk about what Mnet think about this lineup. Yeah, so Mnet are pretty happy. They got their core set of trainees, which is Sungwon, Leo, Anshin, Gomu, and Shinlong, and they also got other people they like Jiahao. In the end, they only got 2 people they didn't want, Sanghyun and Junso, who replaced Junmin and Dongyu. And Sanghyun, like Gyuvin, is someone they don't want but are okay with, as opposed to hate, like Ricky. Junso, I'm not so sure about. This is exactly why they didn't show an interim, although I do wonder why they didn't try to shove Sanghyun and Junso out. Maybe because they wanted Junso and Sanghyun more than a potential Liu and Kangmin 7th and 8th? I don't know what I was doing here. I answered my own question. The reason they didn't show the interim is because they were looking at it and they went, "Oh, dang, Junmin and Dongyu are 14th and 15th. Is there a possibility they could debut? Yes, but if they go up, they might push someone we like out of the group as well. Like, instead of replacing Sanghyun and Sanghyun and Junso, they might replace, like, Leo, for instance. And they saw that 7 through 10 was Liu, Kangmin, Sanghyun, Junso, and they went, well, Junso and Sanghyun are currently in the group, and Liu and Kangmin are out of it. We would, like, out of the 2 pairs, Liu, Sanghyun, and Kangmin, Junso, they fulfill similar roles, right? They would vastly prefer Sanghyun and Junso compared to Liu and Kangmin. Hence why they didn't show it, because they weren't necessarily satisfied with the final lineup, but they thought it was as good as it was going to get. I also said Mnet really stuffed up by freaking out Sanghyun fans, but I predicted that weeks ago. Anyway, they did succeed in getting Sangwon back to rank 1. Anshin or Shinlong would have been there, and you know Mnet was sweating when they saw that. So now let's talk about the various main predictions I've made throughout this series of posts. First, my episode 1 prediction of Mnet's final lineup, which also acted as a pseudo final lineup prediction, considering Mnet usually get the majority of their lineup in. It was Anshin, Gongwoo, Sangwon, Qingwei, Woojin, Shinlong, Rensho, and Dongyu. This was questionable, but still founded in data. I predicted their main 4, which is Anshin, Gongwoo, Sangwon, and Shinlong, and also predicted Dongyu was part of their lineup and knew he would be in the finale. Second, my prediction of the majority of the members being shown in the first episode, and someone from the first performance, i.e. Dongyu, debuting or at least making the finale. I was correct that the majority of performances were shown in the first episode. In fact, they all were, other than Shinlong, whose performance was shown in the second episode, but who was still incredibly salient and highlighted in episode 1. Someone pointed out to me that Junso was actually in episode 2, so that's two of them. Or two and a half, because because Shinlong was very much in episode 1. Third, my final Mnet prediction, for which I predicted Mnet would get 6 or 7 out of 8 of their ideal lineup. I was right. This lineup was Sangwon, Anshin, Leo, Shinlong, Gonwoo, Jiahao, Dongyu, and Junmin. I stand by this Mnet lineup and think it is accurate, and as usual, it was accurate for the final group. They got 6 out of 8 of their ideal lineup, and they didn't get anyone they really hated for the final group. Fourth, my finale predictions from last week. These were a bit wishy-washy, but here they are with my new notes. First, predicting that at least one of Dongyu, Jiahao, or Junmin will debut. I was right, Jiahao debuted. Dongyu will be shown in the interim results to boost him. I was wrong, but I genuinely don't think anyone predicted for only Sangwon to be shown. I stand by that. That was very unpredictable, and like if Dongyu had been like 10th, they probably would have shown him. Gonwoo will debut, I was right. Sungwon will stay at rank 1, I was right. At most, one person out of Yumeki, Sangyeon, Kangmin, Junso will debut. I stuffed that one up, 2 of them debuted. I also didn't think that Junso and Kangmin had the fan bases to get them that high in the rankings. Woojin will rank 16th. At the time, the results weren't out, so he didn't know, but he did rank 16th. Anshin will likely be the maknae. Nah, we got Sanghyun. At least 2, but less than 4 C trainees will make it. I was right. As I said before, my specific prediction was that all 3 of Jiehao, Shinlong, and Anshin would make it, which was right. Rip Kaiwen. Finally, the AO3 lineup, AO3 hours before the finale, predicted in rank order Sangwon, Leo, Anshin, Kaiwen, Liu, Kangmin, Jiahao, and Junso. Unfortunately for those of you who've been following the AO3 stats with me the whole time, this didn't replicate the insanely accurate prediction of the Boys Planet 1 AO3 ranks, but it still somewhat predicted the final lineup. It predicted 5 out of 8 of the top 8, Sangwon, Anshin, Leo, Jiahao, and Junso, and predicted 2 ranks correctly, Sangwon at rank 1 and Junso at rank 8. A very meh result, and not what I and the Kaiwen stands were promised. I also predicted in the past few weeks that there wouldn't be a 9th member because, well, there was no one else they highlighted as much as the top 8, and I was right about that. People who are like, there's a lot of people right now, a few days after the finale, saying that they're waiting for Kangmin to be added and they're like really ready for him to be added. Like, he's not going to be added, guys. Why would they add him? They don't want him. They're certainly not going to add him after the finale. It doesn't matter how talented and experienced he is, they don't like him. Why would they do it? Interestingly enough, this lineup was literally the top 8 from last week, as in the 3rd eliminations. But Junso / Sanghyun switched places and Shinlong / Leo switched places. So in the end, I suppose this was a very boring top 8. Could we have ended the show last week? And 15, my conclusions. Thank you to everyone who's read and commented on my posts. I hope you've all enjoyed them, and I appreciate the majority of you who worked to make my comments section a great place for critical discussion and polite disagreement, as opposed to arguments and hate. And in fact, some of those people who left snarky comments calling me a hater, insane, etc., gave me a laugh even if they were trying to be negative, so good on you, I guess. Not everyone gets the content that I make, and that's okay. I just hope I could at least encourage you to think a bit. If you like my content, you may like my YouTube channel, for those of you who haven't already converted. I make this kind of content on a semi-regular basis. Either way, I'm sure I'll be around for the next Mnet show too, whether that be Island 3, Boys Planet 3, or even perhaps the elusive Girls Planet 2. I'll definitely be following Dongyu and Rensho among others in the future, and I'll follow the final group, of course. I was constantly wondering whether my bias would be Shinlong or Dongyu, but I guess that's been decided for me. The awkward thing for me is that I don't get super invested in trainees because I'm so analytical, but because I work so hard on getting into Mnet's head, I get invested in their debut lineup, and then get sad when it inevitably doesn't go right. Anyway, we're 3 for 3 seasons of getting 2 non-Mnet picks into the lineup. Make of that what you will. The only reason Isna didn't have any non-Mnet picks is because they were 100% rigged. But regardless of whether you see me again or not, don't forget, a critical thought a day keeps Mnet away, and no one is better at critical thinking than Zihao the King.
Alright, top comment's a very sad one. I'm sorry that I was keeping your hopes of Donkyu's debutation alive. Look, honestly, I was pretty convinced he'd make it. I felt like a lot of evidence pointed towards him making it, but I think I got a bit caught up in how much Mnet liked him and imprinted that onto the general public, because obviously if Mnet got to pick this group, he would have debuted. Yeah, I don't know what to say. I'm a bit depresso. Most of these comments are just correcting me about minor details, like Zero Base 1 having to be outside of Korea for schedules, and like Junso being shown in the second episode. So I don't feel like obviously I appreciated all of the comments, but I don't feel like any of them were interesting discussions. Most of them were just small details that I missed. But I did appreciate all of the people thanking me for making the posts. This was an interesting post, how well the trainees played the game. So, like, Mnet's riggery is the most important thing, but, you know, obviously trainees can still do good things or bad things. I've kind of already talked about these, but um, like I mentioned in this comment, Dongyu and Yumeki are good examples of someone who played the game well, i.e., Dongyu, and someone who played it poorly, i.e., Yumeki. So Dongyu did rap, then dance, then vocal in songs that suited the concept of the final group. So it basically showed that he had everything and he did what he needed to do, and that he could fit the concept of the group. A secondary person is Jiehao, who I'm pretty sure also did vocal rap dance. Actually, I don't think he did vocal. Oh no, he did vocal in Chains. So he did a good job with that. Yumeki played the show terribly. I already talked about this. He should have lent really hard into either rap or vocals to prove to the casual audiences and to his fans that not only did he want to be an idol, he was worthy of it. But because he was basically a backup dancer the whole show, he didn't show that and he didn't debut because of that. He would have had a far greater chance to debut if he'd done that. Shout out to Shinlong, who I don't think played the show very well. At the beginning of the show, Shinlong, like the judges said to him, "Oh, if you've got a good personality, you'll be a hexagonal idol." As in, you will have literally everything. You will be good at vocal, rap, and dance, you'll have good leadership, you'll be a nice person, you have charisma, whatever, whatever. I don't know what the 6 points are. But they handed him that characterization on a silver platter, and then he decided to just do rap and dance the entire show. Like, buddy-o, show us your vocals. Show us that you deserve the title of hexagonal idol. I mean, obviously I believe he still does, but I'm literally biased. I'm literally biased. I reckon that if Shinlong had done vocals as well, he could have ranked first or second. As a matter of interest, chances are I will probably be tuning into the C show, especially if C Hal's on it. See, this was interesting. Even if the cost is eliminating Kangmin, like they didn't want him. Why is it a cost? The other thing is, a lot of people were really confused about why I think that they didn't want Sanghyun. I'll talk about that right now actually because I'm done with all the comments here. So let me just ooh, here's my Google page. Let me grab a Word document so I can type what I'm about to talk about. Because I'm about to talk about a bunch of points that I've reflected on since the finale, and I don't want you to just be staring at a blank screen with literally zero clue what I'm talking about, but they're all on my phone, so I can't just write them down. Okay, so first thing I want to talk about is nostalgia. I think we're at the point where really soon nostalgia's going to start hitting super hard with literally everything. In a few months or whatever, we're going to start having people being really nostalgic about Boys to Planet. We're going to have people going, oh, actually, maybe Aldi1 is a cute name. We're going to have people going like, oh, don't you remember when like Sangwon's shoe fell off or something like that? Wasn't that so funny and nostalgic and everything? So I think things will get significantly better soon, especially if the debut song is good. If the debut song's good, all problems will be forgotten, or at least to the same extent they were with Zero Base One, where obviously they have solo fans and everything. But most people don't really care about Zero Base One's fandom toxicity because the songs are good, right? The group is good, so it doesn't matter. Okay, so the next thing I wanted to talk about was favoritism. I've got 2 points in relation to this. So there's one thing that I've noticed with survival shows. I don't think this is a hot take. I think this will sound very obvious when I say it, and a lot of people are aware of this. In my opinion, people are way, way, way too obsessed with trying to convince themselves that their favorite trainees, like their bias, isn't favored by Mnet. There are an insane number of hoops that people will jump through to try and ignore favoritism towards their bias or their one pick or whatever. I personally think the reason for this is people are worried that they will seem shallow or brainwashed by Mnet or like sheeple or whatever if they admit that they like someone who is favored by Mnet or rigged by Mnet. But what they don't realize is that their fave being favored isn't necessarily a bad thing. Um, so, like, I think Dion's a really good example. Like, a lot of people were, like, scared to say that they were a Dion fan because they're like, well, people are, well, I assume this is their thought process. People are going to say that I'm just falling for Mnet's favoritism because she's so heavily favored, or that I'm, like, you know, maybe she doesn't deserve it or something. But she deserved the favoritism, right? She deserved to make the group. So you're not shallow for liking a trainee that Mnet likes because Mnet pick good trainees. Mnet's final groups are like epic. Whenever I look at their ideal lineups, I'm like, dang, I wish this could have been the final group because this group would have like murdered the industry. Mnet are shady and sneaky and nasty and xenophobic, but they're really good at what they do. And what they do is create groups, and they are really good at picking good trainees for those groups. So if a trainee makes Mnet's ideal lineup, like makes it into that lineup and gets favored because of it, that's evidence that the trainee is good. So I don't know why people are so anxious to do stuff like this. My other hypothesis is that people want to do this because they want their favorite person to get into the group while not being favored. They think that it's an FU to Mnet when really it isn't, because Mnet almost always gets their way and they say FU to the trainee a billion times harder than the trainee said it to them. Obviously, a good example of this is Ricky. Like, theoretically, Ricky's debutation says an FU to Mnet, but Mnet FU'd Ricky a bajillion times harder than Ricky FU'd Mnet. So, really, in the end, who won? Usually the corporation. The other thing is, so I think another good example of this, Ricky is an example of the FU thing. Jiahao is the best example of this on this show, I think. Jiahao's fans are so obsessed with saying that his growth was organic, his debut was organic, his virality was organic. It's always about how organic it was, how he made the group through nothing more than his own talent. You know, he's the Ricky of this season. Mnet hated him, but through the power of hard work and talent and sexiness, he debuted. Like, no, he didn't. First of all, like I said earlier, he's not Ricky because Mnet liked him. He did not debut through his own talent. That sounds really mean. I really like Jihao, guys. I really like him, but he did not debut organically through his own talent. Like I said earlier, Mnet allowed him to go viral. And I say allowed purposefully because, like I said, if they'd cut out his parts or they'd cut out his storyline or they'd cut out the judges praising him, they hadn't edited him as well, they hadn't framed him as well, they hadn't given him the crop top, the crop top riggery. If they hadn't done any of that, he wouldn't have gone viral. Can you imagine a version of Chains where Jia Hao doesn't have a crop top? He doesn't have a nice camera framing. The judges don't praise him, and maybe like right at the moment that he starts doing body rolls, the camera cuts to Sangwon making a sexy face or something. Like Mnet could well have done that, and he wouldn't have gone viral. And you can say like, oh yeah, his fan cam. They could have shot his fan cam from an angle where there's someone in the way. They could have cut to a different angle in the fan cam. But even putting that aside, the fan cam, like, people go to the fan cam after watching the episode. Obviously, there's some, like, crazy people, I love you, but you're crazy, who watch every single fan cam from the start to the end of the show. But most people don't do that. Most people only watch one or two fan cams based on what was shown in the episode. And what was shown of Jia Hao in the episode was orchestrated and edited to highlight him so that people would go to his fan cam. And people are like, oh, you know, he was so good in Tambourine, he was so talented that Mnet had no choice but to give him screen time. Like, what are you talking about? Mnet always have a choice. And I've had a few people across various seasons say to me that Mnet have changed their final lineup when they've seen a trainee go viral and then have decided, oh, maybe we want this viral person in our group. No, Mnet have never changed their ideal lineup in the middle of a show. Never ever. Certainly not that I've witnessed in the 4 shows I've watched so far. People are like, oh, they decided to get Ji-yoon partway through. They decided to get Ted partway through. No, they wanted them from the start, and you can tell that based on how they edited them. Same thing with Ji Hao. Like I've said to people a billion times in my comments, in the first episode, he was highlighted with Unshin, and he was especially highlighted as being good at K-pop dance, which shows that he is worthy of being a K idol, not a C idol. So that's the first thing. Second thing is he got tons of screen time, like in performances. Tons of screen time's an exaggeration, but he got a lot of screen time being praised in performances. In what was it, S Class. He was also a candidate for the Signal Song Center along with Anshin, which instantly meant he got praise because you don't pick someone who's not worthy of being the center to be a candidate. And then he got praise in S Class. In Tambourine, he obviously got praise, and that's when people start accepting the fact that maybe Mnet pushed him. But like I said, they orchestrated that. It wasn't organic. I'm going in circles, sorry. I'm rambling, it's not scripted, but like, no. The hoops, the loops, the loopholes his fans will go through to try and convince themselves that he wasn't pushed, he wasn't an Mnet pick, and that he's Ricky and he's FUing Mnet is insane. He is not FUing Mnet. Mnet love him. Mnet were delighted when he made the group because that's another person from their ideal lineup. So if you want to FU Mnet, why'd you vote for Jia Hao? You should have voted for, I don't know, you should have voted for Kangmin. On on the completely opposite side of the spectrum, the other person who's very interesting. So like Jia Hao's one end of this extreme spectrum, right? He's the most common one. Usually people try and convince themselves that their faves weren't favored, right? I've seen people try and do it with Junmin as well. Someone told me that Junmin, I think I included this in the episode 9 section. Sorry, I recorded that a bit ago. Someone tried to tell me that Junmin is not favored because Mnet must have known that he'd get hate. Like, no, why are you trying to convince yourself that he's not favored? Mnet just don't care. You know, I think people think that having a fave that's an Mnet pick is a bad thing. but it's really not. In fact, I would argue it's a good thing because as soon as your pick is an Mnet fave, their likelihood of debuting is infinitely higher. So your likelihood of being devastated when the finale happens is a lot lower because they're an Mnet pick. I mean, I usually try and focus on the Mnet picks so that I start getting invested in them because, like, Dongyu didn't debut, but every other trainee that I've followed that's been an Mnet pick has debuted, like Youngin, for instance. Um, or maybe not Suyeon and Shana, but like, I watched Girls Planet after it aired. Um, your likelihood of depression is far lower if you follow Mnet picks, so that's my hot tip for you. Um, and you're not an Mnet slave if you still think critically about what you're doing. So don't worry about being an Mnet slave. Anyway, this season gives us something very interesting. I don't think I've ever seen this before. Sanghyun's fans are on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, the complete opposite end of the spectrum to Jia House fans. Because Sanghyun's fans keep trying to convince themselves and me and everyone else under the sun that Mnet actually wanted Sanghyun in the group. I have no clue why people think this. As I've said to them a billion times, he had almost no screen time in the show, and the screen time he did have was negative, questioning his choice to do a vocal song that was out of his range when he's a rap trainee. Sanghyun's fans only have two pieces of evidence to say that he was favoured. The first piece is he was shown in the interim, right? Which means nothing. Kaiwen was shown in the interim. Yumeki was shown in the interim. Do you really want to tell me that Mnet wanted Kaiwen and Yumeki in the group? And Zihao too? No. And I don't think people are really arguing about that. I don't think anyone really thinks they want Yumeki except for that one random person. Being shown in an interim does not automatically mean they want you in the group. Usually it means either you're fodder or like they have some other random agenda. So, for instance, the only reason they showed Sanghyun was because they knew that he and Yumeki would have the fandom to boost them up enough to push Masato and Hanum out. If Zihao had had that fandom, well, I guess they did show him. He's a bad example. If they thought that, like, Qingwei had had that fandom, they would have shown Qingwei because they like him more. Sanghyun and Yumeki were just the most acceptable options in terms of fandom size, and because Yumeki had zero chance of debuting, and Sanghyun is far preferable to people like Kangmin and Liu. The second piece of evidence they have is that he's a Wake 1 trainee, and I guess the thought process is Mnet have had Wake 1 trainees previously, therefore they always want a Wake 1 trainee, therefore it must be Sanghyun. What I think people are really missing here is, first of all, Mnet do not automatically want a Wake 1 trainee. Yes, it makes sense for them to, because they get, like, Wake 1 get a larger profit share if they have trainees from their own company. And Wake 1 are working with Mnet, so it makes sense. But the big thing people are missing is we had a Wake 1 trainee in this group who they wanted. It was Gongwoo. Gongwoo was a Wake 1 trainee. They would have got the profit share from him, and they would have had the same benefits of having a Wake 1 trainee. The only reason he's not anymore is because it was found out and they had that whole scandal thing with him and Woojin. But if you look at Mnet's ideal top 8, there is a Wake 1 trainee, it is Gongwoo. There is already one. They don't typically want more than one or maybe two from a company. So both of the points in Sanghyun's favor of being liked by Mnet are meaningless because they're like circumstantial, you know, both his company and his interim check, neither of them are 100% proof that Mnet want him.
because there are trainees they don't want who are Wake One trainees, and there's trainees they don't want who they've given interims to, like to boost them. Therefore, there is literally zero evidence they want Sang-hyun. In fact, I would argue there is evidence to the contrary because they gave him that negative screen time and then invisible edited him. That's why he's Gyuvan, because Gyuvan got invisible edited. Yeah, I think I've said a billion times, both in this video and in comments, that there's zero evidence for it. I genuinely do not understand why people think they want him. His fandom is the only one I have ever seen actively argue and become obsessed with the idea that Mnet must secretly want him in the group, or that they overtly want him in the group, even though there's no evidence. And yeah, I've never seen another fandom do that, because usually fandoms want their trainee to not be favoured, but I guess Sanghyun's want their fave to be, which is interesting. Alright, next. Okay, the big thing about this is that a lot of people thought that when Gomu got announced to be in the group, he looked smug, like he knew it was going to happen. Now, realistically, the chance that he knew it was going to happen is relatively high because he was high ranked and he had high Korean votes. It doesn't take a genius to figure out that he's going to debut, so he was probably aware of that. But that said, I don't think his reaction necessarily showed smugness or pre-knowledge that he was going to debut. I think his reaction was more like resignation, and I think the reason that people are interpreting it maliciously is confirmation bias. If you need a lesson on that, go and watch episode 3. Because Gonwoo antis are biased against him, they're not necessarily antis, but anyone who doesn't like Gonwoo is biased against him, right? So they're automatically going to interpret anything he does negatively. So they see him smile and they go, oh, he must be smug. But you know who had almost an identical reaction to making the group? Zhao Ting. And no one said Zhao Ting was smug, did they? They said, like, oh, she was depressed that she was the only C trainee. She was regretful that she made the group with no other Chinese trainees. She was depressed that she fell so far, right? How come they can make pretty similar expressions and have similar body language, but Gomwu is evil and Jiating isn't, right? I don't want to sound too much like I'm defending Gomwu, but I do think that confirmation bias is playing a big role in this, especially if you look at fan cams of him from behind. He's like knitting his hands together, and I personally think he looks really nervous. I personally think he was like resigned to the fact that he's going to receive a whole bunch of hate for debuting. But you know, if you want to view him as smug, that's up to you, but just be aware that confirmation bias is a big thing, and just because you think he's a bad person doesn't automatically mean that every single thing he does is bad. All right, next one. Okay, so this is pretty short. I think I just wanted to mention this, that like when Sangwon went up, a bunch of them danced to Chains and Lee Jung was the only one left and he looked depressed. I mean, I think he looked depressed because he wasn't going to debut, not necessarily because he thought the others were teasing him or anything. I don't have a big opinion on this, I just wanted to mention it. I think this is probably another issue of confirmation bias where maybe Lee Jung fans are being a bit sensitive and interpreting the others' actions badly. As many people have pointed out, if Lee Jong didn't get a benefit for being in Chains, he would have been eliminated, and he already showed awareness of the fact that everyone else in his team was top 8 and he wasn't, so he was probably aware of it, which is like sad, but at least he was prepared, right? I kind of already talked about this earlier. Sangwon was shown at second and no one else was shown. As I've said before, and many other people have said, literally the second that Sangwon became ranked second or third, and that would have been jumping on it, ready to publish it to freak people out, especially because it was probably Unshin or Shinlong. My personal thought is that it was Shinlong, but like, My evidence for that is that when the Sangwon interim was shown, a lot of Anshin fans would have started voting for him as well because they would have been worried that he was at the top and he was going to get pushed out by Sangwon, or they want him to be the next Junghao or whatever. But Shinlong fans didn't have that same perception. So I reckon that Shinlong was first, and then Anshin and Sangwon both got pushed up by the interim. But maybe I'm just biased and a bit delulu. Anyway, like I said earlier, I don't think any of us could have predicted that that was the only interim shown. And like I said, the reason they only showed that interim is exactly because they didn't think there was a chance of Dongyu and Junmin making it up without risking other people they didn't want more. People they didn't want more than Sanghyun and Junso. Out of the trainees near the group, Sanghyun and Junso were the best, so they kept them. Look, all I wanted to say here is what I've already said. I predicted from episode 1 that Yumeki and Kangmin wouldn't debut, and people said I was insane. So, joke's on you, I predicted this like almost 3 months ago. I'm a survival show prediction god. Okay, so my thing here that's been annoying me is Sangyeon fans complaining about Liu not debuting with him and how depressed Sangyeon was about Liu not debuting. I think this is kind of, obviously I feel sad for the trainees, but I think the fans' reaction is hilarious because you guys knew that the likelihood of them both debuting was low, and a lot of you clearly dropped Liu to vote for Sanghyun. Even though Liu was already outside of the top 9 or top 8. So, why in the world, if you thought there was a low likelihood of them both debuting, which is obvious to literally anyone, why in the world would you vote for Sanghyun if you wanted them both to debut together? Obviously, Aldi 1 is a great opportunity for Sanghyun, and he's going to get tons of opportunities and everything. But any of his fans who are genuinely, viscerally devastated that Liu didn't debut with him, why did you vote for him? Like, Sanghyun is going to be paid dust in this group, and he's not going to be with Liu, and Liu honestly is probably going to be Nugu forever, or is very likely to be Nugu forever. If you were so desperate to have the two of them together, you would have been better off not voting for either of them and hoping that they join a company together and debut elsewhere. Because there was zero chance of them both making this group. So I just think it's like slightly funny, all of the fans complaining about them being separated because you dug your own grave by only voting for Sanghyun and getting Sanghyun to debut. This is like the same thing with Ricky, Bahie, etc. The fans dug their own grave, so I find it bizarre that they would complain. I mean, I guess I see that to be the case with Shinlong and Zihao as well, or Anshin and Kangmin, right? Like, I'm sad that Zihao and Shinlong aren't together, but I'm not viscerally devastated. And I don't deserve to be viscerally devastated, in my opinion, because I didn't vote for Zihao. I mean, I did a little bit, but I didn't really vote for him. So I don't think I deserve to be sad that he didn't debut too, because I didn't contribute to it. That's my opinion. Maybe I sound like a whiny old, like, back in my day or something, but that's my thoughts. Now I just want to quickly see if there's any predictions I made here that I predicted well. Okay, here they'll show most of the people they like in episode 1. I think they showed okay, I don't remember about Junmin. I don't actually remember if Junmin's audition was shown, but they showed all of their other faves in episode 1. except for Shinlong, and I already talked about him, he was salient, so I kind of count him anyway. So I was right about that. Yeah, Mnet definitely used structures for more rigory in this season, and I think it worked for them. And I think that Mnet are going to be more bold with rigory next season because Aldi 1 is a far better rigged group than Zero Base 1. In Zero Base 1, they like six of them. They're okay with Ji Woong. They're okay with Gyuvin, and they don't like Ricky, right? Um, in Aldi 1, they like everyone and they're okay with both Sanghyun and Junso, right? So, and Junso and Sanghyun are rank 7 and 8, right? And Sangwon was rank 1. So, I think the rigory of Boys 2 Planet was more successful in as far as the final group goes than the rigory of Boys Planet 1. So I think Mnet are going to take that and run with it. First demo stage historically leads to a debuting trainee, or at least someone will be in the finale. Yep, so we can add Dongyu here. So the only other season where the person hadn't debuted was season 2 with Hyungsop. So I guess Dongyu gets to join him in sad lack of debutation land. Um, okay. People who had talents shown. Dongyu they wanted, Chingwei they like, Woojin they like, Sangwon and Leo they wanted, Yumeki is Hui. Rensho they liked, Dongyu rigged, Gomu rigged. Okay, so wait a second, sorry. These are the people who were rigged in the first episode. So let's have a look at how many of them debuted or got where Mnet wanted them. Rensho they liked. I don't know if they got him exactly where they wanted him. They probably wanted him to survive the first elimination, but nothing else. Dongyu they wanted, Gomwu they wanted, he debuted. Chingwei they like, Woojin they like, probably wanted both in the finale, they got half of that. Yumeki is Hui, they got him where they wanted they got him where they wanted him. He's in the finale, but not debuting, not by any long shot. Sangwon they like, he debuted. Leo, they like, he debuted. I didn't think that they wanted him. I thought they only wanted Sangwon, but I was wrong. As soon as it became obvious they wanted him in like episode 2, I was like, yeah. Because like as soon as they said, oh Leo, you're our main vocalist, I was like, yeah, they want him. They don't say that to just any random person. Anshin, they wanted he debuted. Shongxing, they wanted him. They got him exactly where they wanted him. He's like comic relief. Sinophobia. Uh, this is supposed to be Chen Kai Wen, so you can see that they liked him right from the start. They've always liked him, but he's not in their debut group like lineup. People have been asking me if he'll be highlighted as someone on the C show. I think like we have to wait to see to be sure, but I think it's decently likely that he's a main character in the C show. Chinan, yeah, I'm so confused what happened with him. I feel like him leaving the show kind of stuffed Mnet up because I feel like they liked him. Jie Yang, I don't think we ever saw him again. Henkyu, I think he was killed by the merge. Jack, love Jack. Sen, I don't know what happened to him. Shinlong, yeah, look, based on styling, I think Mnet likes Shinlong the most out of the Boy Story members. I think they'll be Mnet's pick for a previously debuted idol, and Shinlong has. Why did I write Shinlong? How did that happen? Shinlong has the best chance out of the three of them. They even gave him coloured contacts. See? I predicted this from episode 1. Look, he's even on my list of people who have a good chance of debuting. And here's the other kind of prediction thing. Yumeki, I predicted he'd make the final but fail. He'll get the Hui edit, a bad vocal edit. He couldn't get the bad vocal edit because he didn't do any vocals. He has a massive Japanese fan base, but the 50-50 ratio will work against him, like with Yunning, Richie, Kato, Jay. Yep, I agree with this. I predicted it correctly. Kato and Jay, like, people were like, oh, Yumeki's like third in global votes, so surely he'll debut. Dude, Kato and Jay were third and fourth in global votes, and they didn't debut. What makes you think Yumeki would? So on, whether he debuts or not is based on his editing. I predicted that. um, I thought he'd get more screen time, but Mnet didn't want him, so rip. Still think that him leaving the group was like one of the smartest decisions anyone's ever made on Boys Planet. Leo, I think he'll become an accessory to Sangwon. Sacrificed for Sangwon's depression arc. Okay, look, I thought that he wouldn't debut. Rip. He did. Good on him. Um, but I do think he was an accessory to Sangwon. Songjing, depending on how he gets edited, yeah, so I knew that he could go either way, and he went negatively. Previously debuted idols, I don't think any of them have a chance outside of possibly someone from Very Very, which I thought was very unlikely, so I predicted Kangmin wouldn't debut from the start. And Shinlong, so I knew Shinlong would debut. Choco 1 members could be Muknays, but I don't think they like them enough for that, so I predicted that correctly. Anshin and Shinlong, what is going on here? Anshin and Shinlong only memorable / notable C trainees. We'll see what happens. Yeah, I missed that Jiahao was highlighted as well. I don't know what was going on with me, but he was, right? I was just blinded because I went into this show. I think you should try not to have preconceived notions of what Mnet wants because sometimes they do some wacko things. But I think I went into this show with too many biases, which stuffed me up. For instance, I was biased towards Rensho, so I was really looking for anything that would show that they liked him. I really wanted them to want So On, so I kept looking for evidence that they wanted him. And I thought that they only wanted Anshin and wanted other G trainees to come from the K group. So because of that, I kind of disregarded all of the editing on the C show because I was like, well, they only want Anshin anyway. Maybe Shinlong. You can see that Shinlong's riggery was so strong that even in episode 1, he broke through the 7K 1C barrier that I'd put in my head. But Jiahao, even though he was highlighted from the start, he wasn't strong enough to break through the 1C 7K barrier in my head. And because he was paired with Anshin, I kind of went, nah, he's just an accessory to Anshin. But actually, he was his own character. And that was dumb of me. Oh, I was going to talk about Leo quickly because I've talked about Gomu a lot here, right? Like I've said several times that if you like Shinlong and you believe that Shinlong is a good judge of character, and the same could apply for Sangwon. If you like Sangwon and think Sangwon's a good judge of character, you kind of need to assume that Gomu's a good person. Either those two are bad, they're bad judges of character, or they're good and good judges of character, and Gomu must be a good person then. I'm pretty neutral towards Gomwoo. I think that I've been influenced by the fact that there have been so many false bullying accusations in the past in K-pop, and because I choose to believe that Shinlong is a good judge of character. Obviously, I don't know Shinlong, duh, but I choose to believe that most human beings are generally good. I choose to believe that Shinlong is generally a good person and that he is a good judge of character. Therefore, I assume that Gomu is not a completely evil individual. The other thing is, I talked about it in the last, like, reading my Boys Planet post thing. The fundamental attribution error. We judge Gomu based on his accused actions, right? But based on the apology that he put out, it sounds like, or maybe it was something else that I saw, it sounds like his justification for it was that he was following orders, right? Which, on one hand, to make a very poor connection. That's an excuse that a lot of Nazis used. But um, if his internal justification is that he's following orders, you know, he must not believe that he himself is a bad person, right? So we kind of need to, I don't know where I'm going with this. I'm not trying to convince you that he's a good person, but it probably sounds like I am. Um, I think it's just worth considering the fact that he has justifications for his actions, no matter how poor the justifications are, or no matter how good or bad his actions are. And also that all the other trainees seem to like him. So I think it's weird to like all of the other trainees but not like him. Unless you're willing to believe fault in your bias, which, if you are, good on you, you've already beat most people. So I've talked about Gomu a lot in these videos. I haven't really talked about Leo. Actually, I've seen more people annoyed with. Oh, sorry. I don't want to keep going back to him, but the other reason I'm like, I think I've accepted Gomu is because I accepted that he would debut like 2 months ago. So I've had all of this time to adjust to him being a debut member, so I'm not like outraged or anything. Um, with Leo, so I have an interesting perspective on this because I'm Australian, right? Um, in fact, I'm from Sydney, and I'm pretty sure Leo's from Sydney too. My perception of a lot of Sydney boys, which is what Leo is, and probably a Sydney private school boy, is a lot of them say really dumb, misogynistic jokes because they think that it's going to make them like swag or cool or gangster or something like that because they've internalized those beliefs from our wider misogynistic society. And maybe they listen to a bunch of American rappers who tend to say misogynistic things, right? In my experience, once those boys grow up a little bit, experience the real world, and get educated, they tend to become better. If they don't become educated, then they become crazy incels. But if they become educated and are given a positive environment in which to mature, I think most of them become decent people. And they didn't mean what they were saying, they just wanted to be cool and they were kind of dumb and stupid. And I don't want to say this to say boys will be boys because part of the education system, like the education that's required for them to become better people, is for them to be held accountable and for us not to just go, oh, boys will be boys. They have to learn that their actions and words hurt people, and that's not a good thing to do. And they have to take an active role in their learning. If they don't take an active role in the learning, that's when they become incels. Even though we shouldn't excuse those boys and we should tell them off, hold them accountable, educate them, etc., I do think I have this perspective or this like insider knowledge that a lot of these boys are just lacking an education. And once it's brought to their attention, especially if there's like real consequences, they have a decent chance of becoming better people. And I've seen that several times in my own life. A lot of them are really just influenced by their outside society, which does say boys will be boys. And once they're taught, like, actually, hey, you shouldn't do that, and here's why, they go, oh, wow, really? Um, so I believe that Leo was given a good opportunity to grow. Whether he did or didn't, I don't know. I don't know him in real life. However, I do feel that he has been punished enough. Um, I like if Leo has a soul, that's very philosophical. If Leo has a soul, and I believe he probably does, he would have seen the fact that his actions led to him being kicked out of his group and then quite possibly led to the implosion of the group and then to all of his friends having their dreams of debut like smashed, especially people like Sangwon who were training for so long. If he has a soul, he would have seen not necessarily the effect on himself, but the effect on his friends and fellow trainees, and would have felt remorse for that. And if he felt that remorse, I believe that he would have become a better person and or grown and or learnt or whatever suits you. Um, since I choose to believe that most people are good and choose to believe that Leo probably has a soul, I believe he has probably been punished enough, which is why I am okay with him being in this group. However, that doesn't mean we should forget about what he did, and that doesn't mean we should excuse anything he does in the future potentially. We need to keep an eye on him. Um, but yeah, like I said, I feel like having your entire career crushed and the careers of all of your friends crushed is a pretty apt punishment, you know? Um, what was the other thing I was going to say? I think both he and Gomwoo have shown that they've been emotionally affected by this. Whether you choose to believe whether that emotion is genuine or not is up to you, but if you choose to believe it's genuine, then they've showed remorse. A lot of people were happy with Leo's apology in that he acknowledged what he did, or at least as far as I remember, he did. So that's one thing as well. The other thing is all of the idols speaking up in both of their favor, including, I mean, not really an idol, but including Hana Bang speaking up for Leo. Now, the awkward thing is, I don't really like Hana. She reminds me a bit of like the mean girls in my primary school and first high school. I don't really like her, but a lot of people do like her and have a positive perception of her. And a lot of people feel that she's very feminist. So if she speaks up in Leo's favour, does that tip the scales in his balance? Only you can decide that. I don't take her opinion into consideration in this regard because, like I said, I'm not fond of her. But many people are. So if you are, this is a similar situation to Shinlong and Gomwoo. If you like Hannah and you think Hannah's a good judge of people, especially from a feminist perspective, surely you must think Leo has improved or something. So apologies for all of that. I hope you found it at least a little bit interesting. Those are my thoughts on the ending of Boys Planet. I will make a Riggery of Boys Planet video at some point in the not too distant future. I'll go over that in terms of the structural choices of the show and things. I'll condense what I talked about. I will also, I mentioned this to a few people, I'm working on Produce Season 1, so I'll be working my way through the Produce seasons. I will be following Aldi 1, and I'll be following many of the other trainees, and I'll be following the C Show, and I just want you all to remember that whether your pick made the group or not, whether you are happy with the lineup or not, whether you are happy with the name or not, time heals all wounds, right? And nostalgia is very powerful. And in 5 years, when we have a 5-year-old Aldi 1 ready to disband, no one's going to be thinking, oh, this group is so trash, they don't have a main vocalist. No one's going to be thinking, oh, the group name's trash. No one's going to be thinking, oh, it's so terrible how Zero Base 1 had a 2.5-year contract and they have a 5-year one, etc., etc. No one. And, like, people aren't even going to be complaining about Leo and Gumwoo. Like, no one's going to be complaining about any of that. You're all going to be, the reason I say you is because I don't really cry with K-pop stuff. You're all going to be bawling your eyes out with Shinlong and Sanghyun
when they get all depressed about disbandment or whatever. Um, yeah, so never fear. It will all be okay. Um, so thank you everyone for watching this like combined 6-7 hours of content or whatever it is. I appreciate everyone following my posts throughout the season and being interested in them. Honestly, I'm glad it's over because the posts take a lot of time to write and I'd rather work on videos and I have uni work and everything. Um, but I thought it was interesting. This was a good experience for me, being the first time I've fully tried to predict almost everything in a show, and I got most of it correct, so now I'm all egotistical. Um, and yeah, regardless of whether you rewatch the show or never do, follow Aldi1 or not, follow the C show or not, you can always come back to my channel. And remember, a critical thought a day keeps Mnet away. Hello, squad. This is editing Casper a few days later. I just had a few updates on things that I wanted to mention that I thought about while I was editing, just before the video ends. So first things first, speaking about the lack of an interim and why I was so convinced that Dongyu would debut, I realised that one of the reasons I thought he would debut is because if Mnet didn't show the entire interim, it makes sense to think that it's because their ideal lineup is in the top 8, right? And since Dongyu's part of the ideal lineup, I was like, well, that must mean that he's in the top 8, right? I think I said in advance of the finale that it was unlikely but plausible that Mnet's ideal top 8 were the actual top 8, and I was right. It was unlikely, but it was plausible. It turns out the actual reason they didn't show it is because looking at the point counts, they're not vote counts, people. Everyone labels them as votes. They're points, not votes. Someone did not get 7 million votes. Looking at the point counts, there was basically no way for Junmin and Dongyu to debut, certainly not Junmin, and there was a slight possibility that if Mnet had played with the interims, Kangmin and Liu would have debuted, and as I've said many times before, they preferred Sanghyun and Junso to Kangmin and Liu, so of course they wanted to leave it that way. Yeah, I'd say they're relatively neutral towards both Sanghyun and Junso, and Mnet will always take someone they're neutral towards over someone they don't like. I mean, that's pretty obvious, but still. So they took that trade-off, and then I'll talk... okay, so the contracts, right? I'll talk about the contracts in half a moment more, but the contracts mean they have control over the eliminated trainees to a certain extent, right? So it is entirely possible that we will see Dongyu in some random even 2.0 group, as I predicted, in the near future. So the fact that Mnet have that added layer of protection of having control over eliminated trainees means that they can do things like create an even 2.0. Like they can look at the interim rankings for the finale and go, look, it sucks that Dongyu's not there, but like we can still use him, so it's all good. Next, I just wanted to mention with the whole like Gomwoo smirking thing, I also found out that he was limping during the finale. A lot of people have noticed this, and people suspect that he might have hurt himself in Never Been to Heaven. Like Jiehao had to help him down the stairs at the end, and let's just say he did not look like he was having a fun time. So it's entirely possible that one of the reasons he didn't really have a reaction is because he was potentially, allegedly, in so much pain. Just, FYI, he might have been standing there going, it hurts, it hurts, it hurts. And then the Jaejung was like, Gongwoo, and he's like, it hurts. The other thing is, I don't think I clarified this. I don't even know if it's necessary to clarify. I feel like if you've watched this far into the video, you should know that I don't tend to see things in black and white, but just for the record, in case it needs to be said, I am not a massive lover of Leo who wants to excuse everything he's ever done. I am skeptical of him and am keeping a discerning eye pointed in his direction. But like I said, I think he's been punished enough, which is why I don't have any like vitriolic hatred towards him or anything. Now, the real reason I wanted to jump in here and speak more is because since I recorded this, Dispatch revealed some details of the contracts for both the debut group and the eliminated trainees. The first thing is that the debut group contract is 5 years plus a sixth year in which they release a single album or something like that, which is a bit weird. I have seen a lot of people complaining about the fact that it's a 5/6 year contract. Oh no, they're gonna be trapped under Wake One forever. Like, how terrible. Like, dude, for real? We have known since forever that K-pop contracts are predatory and produce contracts as well. If you weren't prepared for a contract like this, why did you vote your fave into the group? Like, literally, why? This is like the most predictable thing I've ever seen. The other thing is, like I said earlier, you know, people are saying, oh, save them from Wake One. They're going to be stuck under Wake One for 6 years. Like, Wake One is the worst company to ever exist. And I don't know if I said this earlier, but like, if you think that Wake One are trash at managing their groups, you have never followed a group that has actually had trash management. Wake One have a major problem with failing to help their groups reach their full potential, but that's a problem that's pretty widespread throughout the entire industry. I would argue that even Hybe haven't helped BTS reach their full potential, for instance. There's very few groups that reach their full potential. And it's a combination of company management and things like luck. But do note that Wake One's artists, none of them have managed to reach their full potential, but notably, none of them have flopped. They are all doing very well. Even like the most common option, I guess, people think about when they talk about Wake One being a trash management company is Kepler, right? Everyone's like, oh, Kepler flopped. Wake One did not manage Kepler brilliantly, and you can see that from the fact that I rewrote their entire careers. Like, the fact that I felt the need to do that shows that it wasn't brilliant, but I need you to remember, Kepler are selling like 80 to 100,000 copies of an album. CLC never sold over like 20,000. And they're from Cube, right? Not a small company. So I personally, I don't know if I'd say that CLC had trash management. Nah, it could be worse. But like, the point is, there's so many groups who would dream of selling as many albums as Kepler do. Could Kepler have had albums that sold over 1 million copies? Yes. But they're not failing. Isna are not failing. Zero Base One are certainly not failing. Some of their fans are like absolutely obsessed with the idea that Zero Base One were terribly managed. No, what are you talking about? Dude, just look at their album sales. Just look at their cultural impact. They're not poorly managed. Wake One is not trash. Your faves do not need to be saved from Wake One. Your faves should be realistically bowing down and thanking Wake One for giving them the time of day. Because like I said earlier in this video, none of the trainees on these shows will have as good of an opportunity as in the final debut group. if you are complaining about any of the members of LD1 being stuck under this contract, like, yes, it's predatory, but their biggest chance at fame is this group. No one else on the show, like, unless something seriously wacko happens, no one on this show is becoming anywhere near as successful as LD1, right? So I just think it's bizarre that people are doing that. Like, you knew this would happen, and Wake One aren't trash anyway. But if you think they're trash, why would you vote your fave into the group? Yeah, I don't know if I said this earlier, but I wrote, a failure to reach their full potential does not mean bad management, it just means it could have been better. I mean, Kepler are, like, arguably the worst managed, but even they are very salient. They're pretty well known of. No one in their right mind would ever argue that they are Nugu, so on, so on. I think it's possible to recognize both the good and the bad aspects of Wake One's management. The other thing that came out with the contracts was that CJE&M still have control of the eliminated trainees after they're eliminated, and everyone was so shocked about this. But I don't know why. I mean, even exist. The reason even could be created is probably because Boys Planet 1 probably had a similar contract. There's no way that Mnet would let themselves lose control of a trainee that they really wanted, in Even's case, Hanbin and Kato, and in this case, Dongyu and Junmin. So I don't know about other people. Basically, I don't know why people are surprised. This kind of contract has probably been around since like season 2 or something. And I think those are all of my current thoughts. Oh, since I'm doing this, I'll do my usual outro. Thanks for watching, I hope you learned something, and I'll see you in the next video.